A man took a 3-day job for $950. He had no idea it would cost him everything he thought he knew about love, and give him the only thing that ever truly mattered. If you've ever believed that the most important moments of your life would announce themselves before they arrived, this story will prove you wrong. Sometimes fate doesn't knock. It just climbs into the back seat of your car, checks its phone, and refuses to make eye contact. Drop a like and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The alarm went off at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before it was supposed to, because Nathan Reed's phone had been dying slowly for 3 weeks, and the battery glitch had started messing with the clock. He grabbed it off the nightstand, squinted at the cracked screen in the dark, and lay there for a moment listening to the apartment. Quiet, which meant Lily was still asleep. He got up anyway. The bathroom mirror showed him the usual, the dark circles, the jaw that needed a shave he wasn't going to get around to, the faint bruise on his left hand from where he'd caught it on a transmission housing 2 days ago at the garage. He was 32 years old, but looked, on mornings like this, closer to 38. He splashed water on his face, dried it on a hand towel that had seen better days, and went to start the coffee. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had once been somebody's idea of affordable housing and was now just old. The kitchen window looked out over a parking lot, and beyond it, a gas station with a broken sign that had been missing its second letter for so long that Nathan had stopped noticing. He measured the coffee by habit, 2 scoops, not 3, because the can needed to last until Friday, and stood at the counter while it brewed, scrolling through his phone. The message from the dispatch service had come in last night while he was helping Lily with her reading homework. Assignment confirmed. Client, A. Kensington. Pickup. Thursday, 6:30 a.m., Meridian Hotel. Duration, 3 days. Flat rate, $950. Vehicle provided. Dress code, business casual minimum. Punctuality, non-negotiable. $950. He'd done the math 3 times already. Lily's school trip deposit was $120, due Monday. The electric bill was $187, and they'd already gotten one late notice. His car, the actual car he owned, not the one the service would provide, needed rear brake pads before it became someone else's problem on a wet road. Add those up, and $950 didn't leave much margin, but it left enough. He poured his coffee and pulled out the folder he kept in the cabinet above the stove. Bills, pay stubs, a few handwritten notes he used to track what was owed and when. He'd been doing this since Carla left, keeping everything organized the way she never was, because somebody in the household had to know where the money was going, and eventually that somebody had become him by default. Carla. He hadn't thought about her in, he tried to remember, maybe 4 days. That was progress. He heard a small sound from down the hall, then footsteps. Then the bathroom door, the toilet flushing, more footsteps. And then Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing her dinosaur pajamas and dragging her stuffed elephant, Mr. Wrinkles, by one worn ear. "You're up early," she said. Her voice was still thick with sleep. "So are you." I heard the coffee machine. She climbed up onto one of the kitchen stools and set Mr. Wrinkles on the counter, propping him up so he was facing the room. She did this every morning. Mr. Wrinkles got a seat at the table. "Are you going somewhere?" "I've got that job I told you about. Remember? The driving assignment." Lily scrunched her nose, thinking. "The 3 days one?" "That's the one." "So you won't be here when I get home from school." He looked at her. She wasn't asking it like an accusation. She was 7, not 16, and she hadn't yet learned how to weaponize the truth. She was just stating it the way she stated most things, plainly, because she was his daughter and plainness ran in the family. "Mrs. Dunbar is going to pick you up Thursday and Friday," he said, "and Saturday you're going to Grandma's. I'll be back Saturday night." "Can I bring Mr. Wrinkles to Grandma's?" "You can always bring Mr. Wrinkles." She seemed satisfied with this. She reached over and adjusted the elephant's position slightly. "What does the person look like? The one you're driving?" "I don't know. I haven't met them yet." "Is it a man or a lady?" "A lady, I think. Someone named Kensington." Lily repeated the name to herself, trying the syllables out. "That sounds fancy." "Yeah," Nathan said. "It does." Yeah. He dropped Lily at school at 7:15. She had before care on Thursdays. which cost extra but was unavoidable on weeks like this, and drove to the impound lot on Clover Street where he worked 3 mornings a week doing intake documentation and basic diagnostics. It wasn't glamorous work. Nothing about his life was particularly glamorous, but the guy who ran the lot, a Portuguese man named Esteban, who smelled permanently of diesel and had 3 adult daughters he never stopped talking about, paid cash on Fridays, and didn't ask too many questions about schedule conflicts. Nathan spent 2 hours logging a towed Subaru and patching a slow leak on a fleet vehicle they kept for the owner's personal use. At 9:30, he washed his hands in the utility sink, changed his shirt in the back office, and told Esteban he'd see him next Tuesday. "The driving thing?" Esteban asked, not looking up from his clipboard. 3 days. Good money." Esteban grunted. "Fancy people tips good. Make sure you don't talk too much." "I don't talk too much." "You talk to me too much. With fancy people, less is more." He made a gesture with his hand that meant Nathan should take this advice seriously. Be like a ghost that drives very smooth. Nathan drove home, ironed his second-best button-down, and spent 15 minutes online trying to learn something about A. Kensington before deciding that the task felt vaguely invasive. He knew enough. CEO of some kind of investment consulting firm, frequently traveled, known through the dispatch service as a repeat client who tipped correctly but expected everything exactly as specified. Punctuality non-negotiable. He set 2 alarms for 5:30 the next morning and went to bed at 10, which was earlier than usual but felt responsible. The Meridian Hotel sat on a corner of the financial district like it had always been there and always intended to be. 12 stories of glass and dark limestone that caught the morning light in a way that looked expensive without trying. Nathan pulled the provided vehicle, a black Lincoln Navigator, clean and full of gas and smelling faintly of leather conditioner, into the curved front drive at 6:23, 7 minutes early. He sat. He checked his mirrors. He watched the doorman help a couple with matching luggage into a waiting cab, then turned back to the revolving doors with the specific kind of practiced neutrality that comes from years of seeing money walk in and out without ever being part of it. At 6:31, the doors revolved and Ava Kensington walked out. Nathan recognized her from nothing specific. There were no photos on whatever brief profile the dispatch service had sent. He recognized her the way you recognize authority when it's not performing itself, just existing. She was 30, maybe, or close to it, wearing a fitted charcoal blazer over dark slacks, her hair pulled back in a way that looked simple and had probably taken effort. She had a leather portfolio under one arm and a phone in her hand, and she was looking at it as she walked. She didn't look up when she reached the car. He had the rear door open. She got in, settled, and finally glanced forward. "You're Nathan?" Her voice was even, not cold exactly, but measured, like someone accustomed to establishing the terms of every interaction in the first 30 seconds. "Yes, ma'am. Nathan Reed. I'll be your driver for the assignment." A slight pause. "Don't call me ma'am. Ava is fine." She looked back at her phone. "We're heading to the Prescott Center first. I need to be in the conference room by 8. Then Hartwell and Voss. You'll have that address?" "It's all in the itinerary they sent." "Good." She was typing something. "I'll have calls this morning. I'll try to keep it to one earbud so you can hear me if you need to say something." "Understood." He pulled out of the drive smoothly, checking the mirror once. She was already deep in whatever she was reading, one leg crossed over the other, the portfolio open across her knee. She had a pen in her hand, and she made a small notation on something, then turned the page. He drove. He did not talk. Esteban would have been proud. The morning went the way mornings go when you're invisible by design. Nathan navigated the financial district efficiently, found the parking structures, kept the car at a temperature nobody would complain about, and learned quickly the rhythm of Ava Kensington's day. She made decisions fast, spoke on the phone in bullet points, and had a specific tolerance for other people's inefficiency that manifested as a tight, almost imperceptible tightening around her eyes when something went wrong. It went wrong twice. The first time was at the Prescott Center, where the meeting room wasn't ready, and she had to wait 11 minutes in a lobby that seemed to physically offend her. She didn't make a scene. She sat, crossed her ankles, and answered email with the same focused attention she brought to everything else. But when the facilities manager finally came to apologize, she listened to his explanation once and then said simply, "Please make sure this doesn't happen this afternoon." And that was the end of it. The second time was a phone call, late morning, from someone named Marcus. Nathan caught the name because she said it twice in quick succession, like she needed to anchor the conversation before it went somewhere she didn't want. Marcus, I've already reviewed the filing. The issue isn't the timeline, it's the underlying assumption. No, I understand that. But if Brennan's team has already committed to the Q3 projection, then we're building on a number that doesn't account for... No, that's not what I said. I said the assumption is the problem. Her voice didn't rise. That was the notable thing. She didn't get loud when she was frustrated. She got precise, each word clipping shorter, each sentence arriving with less room around it, until there was nowhere for the other person to maneuver. "We'll revisit this at 3, she said finally, and ended the call. Silence in the car for a moment. "The Hartwell building is about 6 minutes from here," Nathan said. "There's construction on 5th, so I'll take Harbor instead." She looked up like she'd briefly forgotten he was there. "Fine, thank you." He drove. She turned back to her portfolio. The first real conversation happened by accident, the way most first real conversations do. It was the afternoon of the first day, and they were between appointments. She told him she didn't need to be at the hotel until 5, which left about 90 minutes of unscheduled time. He'd parked in a surface lot near the waterfront, where she'd asked to walk for 30 minutes, and he'd waited by the car with the windows cracked and his phone, rereading a text thread with Mrs. Dunbar about Lily's reading level. "She tested at grade 2.7 this week," Mrs. Dunbar had written. "Huge jump from October. Whatever you're doing at home is working." He'd smiled at that. He was still smiling slightly when Ava came back to the car 14 minutes early, her heels on the pavement, and he straightened up and reached for the door. "I'm fine," she said, waving off the door. She stood a few feet away and looked out at the harbor for a moment. The wind was coming off the water. Her hair moved. "Good walk?" he asked. He wasn't sure why he said it. Habit, maybe, or just the absence of anything more useful. "Short." She paused. "I don't actually like walking. I just read somewhere that 30 minutes of low-intensity movement improves decision-making by something like 18%. He considered this. "Does it work?" "Sometimes. Less when I'm thinking about the thing I'm supposed to be walking away from." She glanced at him, like she'd surprised herself by saying it out loud. Then she looked back at the water. "You were smiling when I came back." "Sorry. I didn't say stop. I just noticed." She tilted her head slightly. "What was it?" He hesitated a half-second. Not because it was private, it was, a little, but because he was trying to gauge whether this was small talk she actually wanted or just something she'd initiated by accident and would prefer he not engage with. She was still looking at him. "My daughter," he said. Her teacher texted. "She had a good reading test this week." Something shifted in Ava's expression, just slightly. "How old?" 7. "What's her name?" "Lily." She repeated it the way his daughter had repeated Kensington, testing it. Then she nodded, once, and said, "You must be proud." "Every day," Nathan said. He said it without thinking about it, and it came out the way true things sometimes do, without decoration, just sitting there in the air between them. Ava looked at him for a moment longer than felt strictly conversational. Then she turned toward the car. "We should head back." "Yes, ma'am. Sorry." "Ava." And there it was, the smallest, almost reluctant curve at the corner of her mouth, gone in an instant. But there. He opened the door and she got in, and he drove her back to the Meridian Hotel, and the day ended the way it had begun, professionally, at a proper distance, everything in its correct place, except that something had shifted slightly, imperceptibly, the way weight shifts before a door swings fully open. The second day was longer. They drove north out of the city in the early morning, heading toward a resort property in the hill country where Ava had 2 back-to-back meetings with a development group that had been, from what Nathan could gather from the one-sided conversations he overheard, consistently failing to deliver on a construction timeline. She worked in the car the whole way up, and he drove, and neither of them spoke until they stopped at a gas station at the edge of a small town called Ridgeline, where the price on the pump was 20 cents higher than the city, and the adjacent diner had a hand-lettered sign in the window advertising Thursday specials. Nathan filled the tank and came back around to find her standing outside the car, leaning against the passenger door with her blazer off, face tilted slightly up toward the sun. It was early, and the light was still at that low-angle quality that makes ordinary things look intentional. "The resort's another 40 minutes, he said. "I know." She didn't open her eyes. "The meetings aren't until 10. We have time." He waited. "Have you eaten?" she asked. He had, actually. Toast at 5:30, peanut butter, Lily's favorite kind because it was the only kind they kept in the house. "I'm fine," he said. "That's not what I asked." He looked at the diner. "I haven't had a meal at a counter in probably 4 years, she said. It wasn't nostalgia exactly. It was more like the statement of a fact she was still deciding what to do with. "My assistant books everything. Hotel restaurants, catered meetings. Everything has a tablecloth." Nathan looked at the diner again. Vinyl stools. A coffee urn that had probably been in continuous use since before either of them was born. A woman visible through the window moving between tables with practiced efficiency. "We could eat at the counter," he said. She looked at him. "You're my driver. You're also a person." Another one of those pauses that he was learning to recognize as her recalibrating. "Is this professional?" "Probably not entirely." She pushed off the car. "I'm paying." "I assumed." The diner was called Maggie's, though whether Maggie was the current owner or a historical one was unclear. They sat at the counter. The woman who'd been visible from outside materialized in front of them within seconds. Her name tag said Donna, and she had the particular energy of someone who had seen 10,000 versions of this exact moment and still found it interesting. "Coffee?" Donna asked. "Please," Nathan said. "Same," said Ava. Donna poured without ceremony and left 2 laminated menus that had seen better decades. Ava looked at hers with the careful attention she brought to everything, which had the effect of making a diner menu look like a significant document. "What's the Eggs Benedict situation like, do you think?" "I'd go scrambled," Nathan said. "Places like this, the yolk timing is either perfect or a disaster, and it's too early to gamble." She considered this seriously. "Experience? 7 years of choosing diners based on which ones Lily won't complain about. You develop instincts." Donna came back and they ordered. Scrambled for both of them, wheat toast, the home fries because they looked like the kind that had been done on a flat top long enough to develop actual edges. The coffee was strong, and not bad. "Tell me about her," Ava said. He looked over. "Lily? You don't have to, but you mentioned her yesterday, and you were smiling again just now when you talked about the diner thing. And I realize I've spent 2 days in close proximity to someone I know essentially nothing about, which is unusual for me. Most people don't ask their drivers personal questions. Most drivers don't offer diner wisdom." She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "So, Lily," he told her. It came out the way it usually did when he talked about his daughter. Not linear, not curated, but in the order that felt true, which was to say slightly sideways and with interruptions from his own memory. He told her about the dinosaur obsession that had started at age 4 and showed no signs of concluding. He told her about the reading trouble early on, the letters that kept reversing, the weeks of frustration, Lily sitting at the kitchen table fighting tears over a word she couldn't make sense of, and how they'd found the right tutor and how the breakthrough had come gradually, not all at once, but in increments that he tracked and celebrated privately in a way that probably looked unhinged from the outside. He told her about Mr. Wrinkles and how the elephant needed a seat at every table, and had opinions about television programming. Ava listened. She was a good listener in a specific way, not the warm, nodding, making sounds of agreement way that some people used, but still watchful, occasionally asking a question that meant she'd actually been paying attention to the detail 5 sentences back. "You do everything yourself," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "My mother helps when she can. I've got a neighbor, Mrs. Dunbar. She's retired. She picks Lily up from school when my schedule overlaps." "The father?" "I'm the father. I meant," she paused, "Lily's mother." He was quiet for a moment. The home fries arrived and gave him something to do with his hands. She left when Lily was 4, he said. Not a dramatic exit, just gradually stopped being there, and then one day she was actually gone. She's in Phoenix now, I think. We don't have a lot of contact. He said it the way he'd learned to say it, which was matter of fact, without bitterness, but also without performing the absence of bitterness. It was a thing that had happened. It had been hard. It was still, in small ways, hard. But it was also just the shape of his life now, and he'd built something solid inside that shape. Ava was quiet for a moment. My parents divorced when I was 11, she said. She said it like a fact she was laying on the table to balance the one he'd offered. My father remarried. My mother worked until the work became her. I went to boarding school at 13. She picked up her fork. I don't say that for sympathy, I'm just contextualizing. I wasn't asking for context. I know. She ate a bite. But you have this way of being completely honest without seeming to try, and it makes it feel strange to be strategic about what I say in return. He looked at her. That's a compliment, she said, though she said it like it had cost her something. I know, he said. They ate. The diner moved around them. A man in a work jacket paying at the register, 2 older women in the corner booth sharing a piece of pie. Donna refilling coffee with the economical motion of someone who'd done it 100,000 times. Outside, the morning was brightening, the quality of the light shifting from that low gold into the harder clarity of the day. When they got up to leave, she paid, as she'd said she would, and didn't make a production of it. Nathan held the door and she walked through, and there was a half second on the sidewalk where neither of them moved toward the car immediately. Thank you, she said. For the eggs recommendation? For talking to me like I'm a person. She said it lightly, but underneath the lightness was something that hadn't been there when she'd walked out of the Meridian Hotel the morning before. Something honest and a little undefended. You are a person, he said. In my professional life, that's not always how it feels. He didn't say anything to that. He just walked to the car and opened her door, and she got in, and they drove the remaining 40 minutes to the resort mostly in silence. But it was a different kind of silence, not the silence of 2 strangers maintaining a necessary distance. Something else, the kind that doesn't need to be filled because it's already comfortable. The storm came in the afternoon of day 2, faster and harder than the forecast had suggested, which was the thing about mountain weather. It had its own opinions about what it was going to do and no real interest in anyone else's schedule. They'd left the resort at 3:15, Ava having emerged from her second meeting with the focused, compressed energy of someone who'd won an argument through persistence rather than volume. She'd gotten in the car without ceremony and spent the first 20 minutes on the phone delivering a summary of outcomes to someone named Rachel. Then put the phone away and watched the hills. Nathan watched the sky. It had been clear when they'd arrived. It was not clear now. The clouds coming in from the northwest had that gray-green density that meant business, and the temperature had dropped 6 degrees in the last half hour. Weather's changing, he said. She looked up from the window. How much? I don't know yet. Could pass through. Could be more. It was more. The rain started as they came down off the first ridge, a light patter that became insistent within 3 minutes and genuinely heavy within 5. Nathan slowed the navigator and turned the wipers to high. The road was 2 lanes, curving, with guardrails on the right side and a steep hillside to the left, and the runoff was already starting to sheet across the asphalt in a way that required attention. Should we stop? Ava asked. There was no alarm in her voice, just assessment. I want to get us down off the ridge first. There's a town about 12 miles down. We can evaluate there. She nodded. She pulled her portfolio onto her lap and then didn't open it, which was the first time he'd seen her not immediately fill idle time with work. He drove carefully, both hands on the wheel, reading the road the way he'd learned to in his early 20s when a mentor at the first garage he'd worked at had told him that a good driver doesn't just see the road in front of him, he sees the road 10 seconds ahead. He watched the curve radii, the drainage patterns, the surface texture changing where the rain had been running longest. 8 miles from the ridge, the car made a sound it shouldn't have made. It wasn't a catastrophic sound. It was more of a muffled thump from somewhere underneath, and then a very slight change in the way the steering responded. Nothing a passenger would notice, but something Nathan felt immediately in his hands. He pulled to the side of the road, which was barely a roadside and more of a narrow gravel shoulder with a wall of wet rock above it. "What happened?" Ava asked. "I'm not sure yet." He put the car in park and left the engine running and the hazards on. "I need to look at it." The rain was significant. He grabbed his jacket from the front seat and got out. It took him 3 minutes in the rain, crouched at the front and then the back of the vehicle to understand what had happened. A rear control arm mount had given way. A stress fracture in the bracket, probably pre-existing. The rough mountain road, the final insult that had finished it. The wheel wasn't off, but the geometry was wrong, and the car wasn't drivable at speed. Not safely, not on a wet mountain road at dusk. He stood up. He was already thoroughly soaked. He got back in the car. "Well," Ava said, "the rear suspension has a bracket failure. I can't drive it at highway speed. Not safely on this road in this weather." He was dripping on the seat. He tried to be matter-of-fact about this, because she didn't need his frustration on top of the situation. "I'm going to call roadside assistance first. Then I'm going to see what the timeline looks like and figure out options." She looked at him. "Can you fix it?" He considered the question honestly. "I can get it functional enough to drive carefully at low speed if I have the right materials. The bracket failure, the mount has partially separated. If I can brace it and reroute the alignment load, we can get to town." He paused. "The problem is, I don't have what I'd need to do that in the vehicle. I'd need to improvise." She was quiet for a moment. Rain hammered the roof. "The roadside service is going to take how long?" He'd already been running the math. Remote mountain road, peak of a storm, late afternoon. "Minimum 90 minutes, probably more." She looked at the window. The water was coming down in sheets now, the visibility past the guardrail essentially zero. "Can you improvise?" He thought about it. There was a basic toolkit in the Lincoln, legally required by the service. There was the car itself and whatever it contained. There was the terrain. There was his own knowledge of how suspension geometry worked and what it would take to distribute the load acceptably for a low-speed emergency drive. "I can try," he said. "I can't promise it works, and if it doesn't work, we wait for roadside. But I can try." She unclipped her seatbelt. "I'll hold the flashlight," she said. He looked at her. She was in a blazer and slacks and shoes that were not designed for a wet mountain shoulder. "You don't have to." "You can't do it with one hand." She said it plainly, with no performance attached. "I'm not helpless. Tell me what to do, and I'll do it." Seb. He worked for an hour and 40 minutes. The rain didn't let up. If anything, it intensified during the middle portion of the repair, the stretch where he had the wheel off and was working with a combination of the included jack, a length of cable from the emergency kit, and a piece of flat metal he'd removed from a non-critical bracket elsewhere on the chassis that he could repurpose. It was not a textbook repair. It was the kind of repair you make when textbooks aren't available, and getting it wrong means you're stuck on a mountain overnight. Ava held the flashlight. She didn't complain. She held it steady, re-angled it when he asked, and when her arm started shaking from the cold in the extended position, she switched hands without saying anything about it. At one point, she handed him a wrench before he'd finished explaining which one he needed, which meant she'd been paying attention to the process. Her blazer was ruined. Her shoes were ruined. Her hair, immaculate that morning, was simply wet now, plastered to her forehead and neck, in a way that made her look less like a CEO and more like a person caught in the rain, which is what she was. Neither of them talked much. When they did, it was functional. He needed the light higher. He needed her to hold a component in place while he threaded the cable. He needed her to read the tension while he torqued. At one point, during a break in the work, while he reevaluated the geometry, she said, "Where did you learn to do this?" "My uncle had a shop in Trenton. I started working there at 15. He lay back under the vehicle. "Hand me the flathead." She found it. "Did you always want to be a mechanic?" "I wanted to be an engineer, mechanical. I had 2 semesters at community college before Lily happened, and the math stopped working out." A pause. "Do you resent it? The way things went?" He thought about this honestly, lying in the rain under a broken car on the side of a mountain. "No," he said. "I used to, a little. When I was tired and the bills were hard and I felt like the life I'd planned had become someone else's. But then Lily does something. She says something, or she figures something out, or she just looks at me the way she looks at me, and the whole math problem changes. The variables are different, and the answer comes out different. He found the point he needed and began working. So no, he said, not anymore. Ava was quiet for a moment. That's an extraordinary thing, she said, to feel that way about your life. He could hear something in her voice that he couldn't quite name. Not envy, or not only envy, more like recognition of a distance, a realization that something existed on the far side of a gap she'd never thought to measure before. He didn't say anything to that. He kept working. Bam. At 7:18, they were back in the car. The repair was imperfect, and he knew it and she knew it, and they drove down the mountain at 35 miles an hour with the hazards on, and Nathan reading every curve before it arrived, and it took twice as long as it should have, and neither of them minded. The town at the base was called Haver, population under 3,000, and it had a motel, a diner that was open late, and a gas station with a garage bay where a man named Delroy agreed, for $60 cash and the cost of parts, to look at the car first thing in the morning. Nathan called the dispatch service and explained the situation. They made arrangements. He called Mrs. Dunbar. She was already 2 steps ahead of him. Lily was fine, had done her homework, eaten dinner, and asked whether she could watch 20 more minutes of a nature documentary before bed. Tell her yes, Nathan said. I already did, Mrs. Dunbar said. He and Ava ate at the diner, so real food this time, a full meal, at a booth in the back while the rain continued outside, and the few other patrons were the specific kind of self-contained that comes from living somewhere small and being comfortable with quiet. She'd bought a cheap rain jacket from the motel's small gift shop and changed in the bathroom, and she looked different in it, less armored somehow, more plainly herself. Delroy seems competent, she said. He's got clean tools and an organized bay. That tells you a lot. You read garages the way I read boardrooms. You read people, he said. I just noticed. In the meetings this morning, you weren't listening to what they were saying, you were watching how they said it. She looked at him with something that might have been surprise. Most people don't catch that. Most people aren't driving and paying attention at the same time. He shrugged. Also, you tilt your head slightly to the left when someone says something you don't believe. She touched her head, an involuntary reflex, and then caught herself and let her hand drop and looked at him with an expression that was genuinely unguarded for the first time. Not performed openness, just surprised out of her armor. That's unsettling, she said. Sorry. Don't be. She picked up her water glass. It's been a long time since anyone paid that kind of attention. The rain kept coming outside, the booth was warm, the food was simple and good. Nothing memorable, just real. They sat there longer than the meal required, not talking constantly, not filling every moment, but present in a way that was different from professional proximity. Comfortable in the way that only comes when 2 people have done something together that required real trust. Neither of them named it. Neither of them needed to. When they finally walked across the motel parking lot, 2 rooms, opposite ends of the building, professional as the arrangement required. The rain had eased to a fine mist, and the sky had cleared at the edges, and you could see, if you looked south, the beginning of stars. Nathan, she said. She'd stopped at the door to her room. He turned. She looked at him for a moment like she was deciding whether to say the thing she was thinking or the safe version of it. Thank you, she said, for tonight. I should have checked the vehicle more thoroughly before we... Not for that. She paused. Just... Thank you. He held her look for a moment. Good night, Ava, he said. He went inside. The room was a motel room, which is to say it was generic and clean and faintly sad in the specific way all motel rooms are, and he lay on the bed in the dark and looked at the ceiling and thought about the angle of the flashlight beam in the rain, and how she'd held it steady without being asked, and how she'd said, I'm not helpless, with no self-pity and no bravado, just the simple fact of it. He thought about Lily, 7 years old, dinosaurs, and Mr. Wrinkles, and the way she tested words by saying them aloud. He thought about the stars visible at the edge of the clearing sky. Then he closed his eyes and went to sleep. Because the 3rd day was tomorrow, and he still had a job to do. And whatever was happening in the margins of that job would have to sort itself out in its own time. He didn't know yet what it would sort itself into, but he knew, in the way that you know certain things before you have words for them, bone deep and sure, that something had already changed. And he couldn't be certain, lying there in the dark, whether that was something he should be afraid of, or something he'd been waiting for longer than he'd ever admitted to himself. The third day started the way mornings start after nights. You've spent thinking too much, with the particular exhaustion of someone who slept but didn't fully rest, and the awareness, immediate upon waking, that something had shifted in the architecture of ordinary life. Nathan was up at 5:40. Old habit. He lay in the motel bed for a few minutes, staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to the quiet that follows a storm, that specific washed-out stillness where everything sounds slightly cleaner than it did the day before. Then he got up, splashed water on his face, and went to check on Delroy's progress. The garage bay was already lit when he crossed the parking lot. Delroy was underneath the navigator on a rolling creeper, working by the sound of it, and he slid out when he heard Nathan's footsteps on the concrete. "Mount was already cracked before you hit the road yesterday," Delroy said, by way of greeting. He was a compact, unhurried man in his mid-50s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead that he never seemed to actually use. "You want the honest version or the polite one?" "Honest." "Whoever did the last service on this vehicle missed it. Stress fracture. At least 6 weeks old, maybe more. Your improvised fix last night was better than it had any right to be." He sat up and wiped his hands. "I've got a replacement bracket coming from the parts supplier in Marlin. Should be here by 8. I can have you road ready by 10. Nathan nodded. "What do I owe you?" "Parts are 62. Labor is 40. Delroy said it without looking up. "Coffee's in the office if you want it." Nathan took the coffee and called the dispatch service to update the timeline, then sat on a plastic chair outside the bay and watched the sky turn from gray to pale blue over the hills. His phone showed a message from Lily, sent at 8:15 the previous night. A photo of the nature documentary she'd been watching, a frame-captured image of a slow loris blinking at the camera, captioned in her laborious 7-year-old spelling, "This is you when you are sleepy dad." He laughed at that quietly, alone in the parking lot, the way you laugh at the things your kids do when no one else is watching. He typed back, "Very accurate. Love you. Be good for Grandma today." Then he pocketed the phone and drank his coffee and tried not to think about the way Ava had looked at him last night outside her room door, deciding between the honest thing and the safe version. He wasn't sure which one she'd landed on. He wasn't sure what he'd wanted her to say. At 7:50, she came across the parking lot toward the garage, dressed for the day, heeled shoes traded for the plain flats she must have had in her bag, the cheap gift shop rain jacket replaced by the blazer she'd had dry cleaned somehow in the 14 hours they'd been in Havre, which struck him as both impossible and completely unsurprising. She stopped beside him. He handed her the extra coffee Delroy's office had yielded. He'd gotten 2, on instinct, without thinking too much about what that meant. She took it. "What's the timeline?" "Road ready by 10. We'll be back in the city by early afternoon." She stood beside him and looked at the hills the same way he'd been looking at them. There were cattle on a far slope, small and dark from this distance, moving slowly through the wet grass. "I called Rachel this morning," she said. "Rescheduled the afternoon meetings. You didn't have to. We're running 4 hours behind." She sipped the coffee. It was the practical thing. He didn't push it. She was someone who needed her decisions to live in the category of practical. He was beginning to understand that about her, that she felt things quite specifically but routed them through logic first, the way some people translate everything into a second language before speaking. "Your daughter's at your mother's today?" she asked. "Yes, she texted me a picture of a slow loris last night." "A what?" "Small primate, big eyes." He showed her the phone. She looked at the photo and then at the caption, and the corner of her mouth lifted in that way it had, almost involuntary, like a reflex she hadn't approved. "This is you when you're sleepy dad," she read aloud. She handed the phone back. "She's got your number." Since birth, basically. Delroy emerged from the bay to ask about a specification, And Nathan went in to look, and when he came back out, Ava was sitting in the plastic chair he'd vacated, both hands around her coffee, watching the cattle on the hill. She looked, in that moment, like someone who'd briefly forgotten to look like anything in particular. He sat on the low concrete wall beside the bay entrance and didn't interrupt it. After a while, she said without looking at him, "Do you know what I spent last Saturday doing?" "No." "I spent 11 hours in my apartment reviewing a due diligence report for an acquisition that ultimately I'm going to recommend we pass on." She paused. "And Sunday I had brunch with my CFO and his wife, which lasted 2 hours and felt like a performance review in formal wear." He didn't say anything. He sensed she wasn't finished. "I don't remember the last Saturday I spent doing something that wasn't related to the company in some way." She said it matter-of-factly, not asking for anything. "I'm telling you that not because it's tragic, just I keep thinking about what you said last night, about the variables changing." "The math problem." "Yes." She finally looked at him. "I've been running the same equation for a long time and getting the same answer, and I think I stopped asking whether the formula itself was wrong." He thought about that. A truck went by on the road outside, slow and heavy with whatever it was hauling. The air smelled like wet clay and diesel. "What would you do?" he said. "With a free Saturday?" She looked at the question like it was unexpected. "I don't know." "Take a guess." She thought about it seriously, the way she thought about most things. "Sleep past 7. Eat something I made myself, even if it was bad. Walk somewhere without a destination and without caring about the 18% decision-making improvement." A pause. "Find out what I'm like when I'm not being useful to anyone." He looked at her. "That's not sad," he said. "That's just honest." "Most honest things are a little sad." "Fair enough." Delroy's parts arrived at 8:12, and by 9:45 the Navigator was lifted off the jack and road-tested down the main street of Haver and back, Delroy confirming the geometry with a brevity that suggested he didn't believe in wasting words on things that were working the way they should. Nathan paid him in cash. The service would reimburse it. And Delroy accepted with a handshake and the observation that the original improvised cable solution had shown creative thinking, which coming from Delroy was clearly the equivalent of a standing ovation. They loaded back into the car and headed south, back toward the city. The road dry now, and the sky completely clear, the mountains in the rearview mirror looking almost casual about the storm they'd produced the night before. Somewhere around the midpoint of the drive, with the hills giving way to flatter terrain and the traffic beginning to build toward city density, Ava put her portfolio away. Nathan noticed because she'd had it open on her knee since they'd left Haver, and she'd been working, and then she stopped, and he watched in the rear view as she set it in the seat beside her and leaned her head back and closed her eyes. He didn't say anything. He drove. After about 20 minutes, she said, eyes still closed, "How did you sleep?" "Fine," he said. A pause. "You're lying," she said. He adjusted his grip on the wheel. "Adequately," he corrected. "Better." She opened her eyes and looked at the passing terrain. "I kept thinking about the flashlight. Isn't that strange? I kept thinking about holding it and how my arm hurt and how that's the most physically useful I've been in probably 2 years. You were useful. It would have been significantly harder without a second pair of hands. You would have managed. I would have managed worse." She seemed to consider this distinction meaningful. "I like that distinction," she said. "Most people would have said, no, you were essential," or something equally untrue. "You weren't essential. You were genuinely helpful. That's actually better because it means you made a choice to be, rather than just being necessary by default." She turned her head and looked at the back of his. He could feel it. "You think about things in a particular way," she said. "Occupational hazard of long drives." "No, I mean," she paused. "You think about the difference between things, between what's true and what's the convenient version, between what's helpful and what's essential. Most people blur those. Most people find it easier. Don't you?" He thought about it. "No," he said finally. "I've got a 7-year-old who asks clarifying questions. You learn not to blur things around a kid who will immediately notice when you do." She was quiet for a moment. "What does she ask about?" "Everything." He changed lanes around a slow truck. Last week she asked me why the sky is blue, and when I explained it, she asked why I thought the light chose to scatter that color and not a different one. And when I told her light doesn't make choices, she looked at me like I'd said something profoundly disappointing. Ava made a sound. Not quite a laugh, more like the sound a laugh would make if it was surprised to find itself happening. She sounds like someone worth knowing, she said. He looked in the rearview mirror, just briefly. She is, he said. She's the best person I've ever known. And I'm not saying that as a dad. I'm saying it as someone who's met a lot of people. The city emerged gradually ahead of them, the skyline assembling itself piece by piece over the flat approach. And Nathan felt the assignment ending the way you feel the last chapter of something arriving. Not with drama, but with the specific weight of things coming to a close. They didn't talk much for the last 30 minutes. The traffic required attention, and she was back on her phone, fielding the messages that had accumulated, re-entering the stream of her working life. But there was something different about even this silence. It wasn't the silence from the first morning. It wasn't the careful professional quiet of two people maintaining a necessary distance. It was the silence of two people who had said enough real things to each other that the absence of words wasn't empty. He pulled the Navigator into the Meridian Hotel's curved drive at 2:14 in the afternoon. He had the door open before she'd fully gathered her things. She stepped out onto the sidewalk and stood for a moment, the portfolio under her arm, her phone in her hand, looking at the hotel entrance the way someone looks at a door they're not quite ready to walk through. Your service will receive the full rate plus the delay compensation, she said. I'm noting in the booking that the vehicle issue was pre-existing and not attributable to the driver. You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. She looked at him. Nathan. He waited. She seemed to be doing the calculation again. The honest version or the safe version. He watched her decide. This was not the assignment I expected, she said. No. You're not... She stopped, started again. I meet a lot of people in my position. I meet competent people and strategic people and people who know how to present the best version of themselves for maximum effect. She paused. You're not doing that. You're just... you. I don't really have a better version, he said. Yes, you do, she said. You just don't use it as a tactic. She held his look for a moment that went on long enough that the doorman at the hotel entrance began to find somewhere else to direct his attention. Thank you for the driving and the repair and the diner and the conversation. Thank you for the eggs. She blinked. You paid for the eggs, he said. That first morning, the diner in Ridgeline. Something crossed her face that he didn't have a name for. Not quite amusement, not quite something more serious, both at once. I did, she said. Good eggs. They were, she agreed. And then, because the moment had its own momentum, and because she was someone who occasionally surprised herself, she said, I'd like to meet Lily sometime. He went still. She noticed. I'm sorry. That's forward. No. He shook his head slightly. It's not forward, He tried to find the words that were true. Lily doesn't meet a lot of new people. I'm careful about who comes into her world. Of course. She pulled back, not hurt, just recalibrating. I didn't say no, he said. She looked at him. I said I'm careful, he said. Not that I'm not interested. The distinction hung in the afternoon air between them. She received it. He watched her receive it. Watched her decide not to deflect from it or qualify it, but simply take it for what it was. Then I'll leave it with you, she said. He nodded. She walked toward the hotel entrance. The doorman materialized, held the door. She went through, and she didn't look back, and Nathan stood beside the Lincoln for a moment longer than he needed to, looking at the space where she'd been. Then he drove away. The dispatch service needed the vehicle back by 6. He had time. He took the long way, through the park road that ran along the east side of the waterfront, the windows down and the late afternoon air coming through smelling like cut grass and car exhaust, and the specific urban combination of things that meant home. He picked up Lily from his mother's at 5:30. She came through his mother's front door like she always did, at a run, announcing herself well in advance of her actual arrival, and she hit him at mid-chest height, and he caught her, and she smelled like his mother's house, like the particular combination of cooking and cedar and the lavender soap his mother had bought in bulk for 20 years. Dad, I learned a card trick. Show me in the car. Grandma tried to teach me poker. Absolutely not. I learned to deal. She was indignant. Just dealing. It's a life skill. You're 7. 7-year-olds need life skills. His mother appeared in the doorway with a look that declined to confirm or deny the poker situation. She handed him a foil-wrapped plate. Leftovers, as always, more food than 2 people could eat, presented as though this required no acknowledgement. She ate well, his mother said. She's been fine. You look tired. I'm fine. His mother looked at him the way mothers look at their children when they decide not to have the conversation they're having. Drive safe. In the car, on the way home, Lily sat in the back with her seatbelt on and Mr. Wrinkles in her lap and attempted to explain the card trick using entirely the wrong terminology. And Nathan listened and asked questions at the appropriate intervals and felt, with a completeness that still sometimes surprised him, how much of himself lived in this small person. Dad? Lily said, mid-explanation. Did you have a good trip? I did. Was the lady nice? He thought about the diner in Ridgeline, and the flashlight in the rain, and the sound she'd made that was almost a laugh. He thought about her saying, I'd like to meet Lily sometime, and the way she'd said it, not as a performance, not as something designed to impress him, just a real thought arriving unfiltered. She was, he said. She was actually pretty nice. Is she fancy? Very. Lily absorbed this. Mr. Wrinkles says fancy people are usually sad. Nathan looked in the rearview mirror. Mr. Wrinkles said that? This morning, at breakfast. Mr. Wrinkles is getting very philosophical. What's philosophical? It means thinking deeply about things. Oh, she looked at the elephant. He does that a lot. Nathan drove them home through the early evening, through the city streets that knew him the way only places you've lived in for years can know a person, past the gas station with the broken sign and up the 3 flights to the apartment, and the refrigerator and the homework and the bedtime routine that ran the same way every night because routine was a form of safety that he'd learned to provide even when other things were uncertain. He tucked Lily in at 8:45, Mr. Wrinkles positioned correctly, the nightlight on. She was half asleep before he was done, the way young children surrender to sleep with a completeness adults can only envy. He stood in her doorway for a moment in the dark. $950. That's what the job had been. That's what he'd said yes to, standing in this apartment 3 days ago, doing the math on school trips and electric bills and brake pads. He tried to reconstruct that version of himself, the one who'd set 2 alarms and ironed his second-best shirt and thought about being invisible, a ghost who drove very smooth, and found that the distance between that morning and this one felt longer than 3 days should reasonably account for. He went to the kitchen. He paid the electric bill online, arranged the school trip deposit, noted what was left. The numbers were what they were. They always were. Nothing dramatic, just the steady arithmetic of a life lived carefully at the edge of comfortable. He didn't mind it the way he used to. He'd made his peace with the math a long time ago. He poured himself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the parking lot and the gas station with its missing letter, and thought about a woman who couldn't remember the last Saturday she'd done something that didn't belong to the company. He thought about how she'd said, I'd like to meet Lily not as a line, but as a thought she'd had, and decided to say out loud. He thought about what it would mean to let that happen, what it would mean to let anyone new into the careful, calibrated world he'd built around his daughter and himself. The risk of it. Not just for him, that part he could manage, but for Lily, who loved without reservation the way 7-year-olds do, who would attach and trust and need, and who would not understand, not in any way that wouldn't leave a mark, what it meant to lose someone who'd entered that space and then left. He was careful for a reason. He'd been careful for 3 years for a reason. He finished his water and rinsed the glass and set it in the drying rack. His phone sat on the counter. No messages. Nothing from Ava Kensington, which made sense. They had no ongoing arrangement. The assignment was complete. The professional relationship had concluded at the Meridian Hotel's front entrance with an exchange of sufficient ambiguity that either of them could choose to let it be exactly what it appeared to be on the surface, a 3-day job, professionally handled, with an unexpected storm and a repaired suspension and a couple of honest conversations along the way. That was the safe version. He picked up his phone, put it back down. He went to bed. He didn't sleep immediately. He lay in the dark and listened to the apartment settle around him, the ambient sounds of the building, pipes, someone's television through the ceiling, the distant complaint of the elevator, and let his mind do what minds do when they're not fully controlled, which is wander toward the thing they've been trying not to look at directly. He thought, she's 30. She runs a company. She lives in a world where tablecloths are standard and assistants book everything, and Saturdays are something that happen to other people. He thought, she held a flashlight in a rainstorm for an hour and 40 minutes without complaining about her shoes. He thought about the way she'd said, "You're not doing that. You're just you," and how that had landed somewhere deep and quiet in him, like a key fitting a lock he hadn't known was there. He thought about Lily asking whether the lady was nice. He thought about Mr. Wrinkles and his theory about fancy people. And then, somewhere between thought and sleep, he let himself admit, quietly, privately, with no audience and no consequence, that he was going to think about this for a long time. That it wasn't going to resolve itself cleanly into the category of a job that was over. That something had started in the margins of a 3-day professional arrangement. Something that had not, when the car pulled away from the Meridian Hotel, actually ended. He didn't know what to do with that. He wasn't sure he needed to know yet, but he was done pretending he didn't feel it. The apartment was quiet. Down the hall, Lily slept the deep, uncomplicated sleep of someone who trusted completely that the world would be there when she woke up. Nathan had built that trust, one careful day at a time, and he would not do anything to endanger it. Whatever came next would have to prove itself. Whatever came next would have to be sure. He closed his eyes, and this time sleep came. 2 weeks passed. Nathan paid the electric bill. He replaced the brake pads on his car in the building's parking lot on a Sunday afternoon, while Lily sat on an upturned milk crate beside him, handing him tools with the seriousness of a surgical assistant and providing commentary on each one. He picked up 2 extra shifts at the impound lot. He helped Lily with her reading 3 nights a week, sitting at the kitchen table with the workbook between them, sounding out words with the patience of someone who understood that progress wasn't linear, and that some days the letters still reversed themselves no matter how hard she tried. He did not think about Ava Kensington. That was the story he told himself anyway. The truth was more complicated, the way truth usually is. He thought about her in the margins, in the spaces between tasks, in the car during the longer drives, in the quiet after Lily was in bed and the apartment was just himself and whatever was on the ceiling. He thought about the diner in Ridgeline and the way she'd ordered scrambled eggs like it was a considered decision. He thought about her holding the flashlight in the rain, switching arms without saying anything about it. He thought about what she'd said outside the hotel. "You're not doing that. You're just you." He thought about it the way you think about something you've decided not to act on, which is to say, constantly, and with the specific frustration of someone who has made a reasonable decision and resents how little the reasonable decision is cooperating with his actual interior experience. On a Thursday evening, 17 days after the assignment ended, his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. He was in the middle of dinner, Lily across the table with a fork in one hand and a small plastic stegosaurus in the other, explaining to the dinosaur why it should eat its vegetables. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Nathan." Her voice was exactly as he remembered it, measured, direct, with that slight careful quality underneath, like someone who'd thought about what she was going to say before she said it. He was quiet for 1 second. "Ava." Lily looked up from the stegosaurus. "I'm sorry to call unannounced," she said. I want to be direct about something because I think that's the only way I know how to be, and indirect approaches have never worked well for me." "Okay," he said. "I've been thinking about the drive, about the conversations we had." A pause. "About what I said outside the hotel." "Me too," he said. Another pause, longer. "I'd like to see you again," she said. "Not as a client, not as an assignment, just, I'd like to see you, if you're open to it." He looked at Lily, who had resumed her lecture to the stegosaurus, and was now explaining the importance of leafy greens to a creature that had been extinct for 150 million years. "Can I call you back in 20 minutes?" he said. "Of course." He finished dinner. He washed the dishes while Lily dried. She wasn't tall enough to reach the drying rack, so she stood on her step stool and deposited each item with significant care and the ongoing dinosaur narrative, which had now escalated to include a moral lesson about sharing. He got her into her pajamas and read her 2 chapters of the book they were working through together, and when she was settled and the nightlight was on, he stood in the kitchen with his phone and called Ava back. She answered immediately. "You called back," she said. "I said I would. People say things." "I know." He sat down at the kitchen table. "I want to be direct too, because I think that's the only way this works, if it works." "All right. I've been thinking about it too," he said. "And I'm not someone who does things halfway. If I let someone into my life, that means my actual life, which includes a 7-year-old and a 3rd-floor walk-up, and a schedule that requires a spreadsheet to navigate. It's not simple. And it's not the kind of thing that fits neatly into someone's calendar between board meetings." "I know that." "I don't think you do yet," he said. "Not unkind, just honest. I think you know it the way you know things before you've actually lived them." A pause. "That's fair," she said. "I'm not saying no," he said. "I'm saying that what you're asking to walk into is more complicated than a dinner or two and then back to your regular life." "What if I don't want to go back to my regular life?" she said. The words came out with a directness that surprised even her. He could hear it, a slight catch after she'd said it, like she'd moved faster than she'd intended. He was quiet for a moment. "Then we start slowly," he said, "and we're honest with each other when it's hard." "I can do slow," she said. "I'm less sure about the honest part. I'm working on it." "I know," he said. "I noticed." She laughed. It was a real one. Brief, slightly surprised at itself, nothing like the controlled almost smile he'd catalogued during the 3 days of the assignment. A real laugh, the kind that happens before you can decide whether to allow it. He hadn't heard her laugh before. It was a good sound. They talked for an hour, not about anything dramatic, about the week, about the acquisition she'd decided to pass on, about a book Lily had declared her current favorite that involved a dinosaur detective solving mysteries in a swamp. The conversation moved between topics with the ease of people who had already, in a relatively compressed and strange 3 days, established that they could say real things to each other without it becoming a disaster. When they hung up, it was past 10. Nathan sat at the kitchen table for a few minutes in the quiet. He was in trouble. He'd known it, lying in bed that first night back. He was in trouble, and he'd walked into it with his eyes open, which was either the wisest or the most foolish version of the same thing. He thought about Lily. He thought about what careful meant and how you measured it. He thought about the sound of Ava's real laugh. Then he made his decision the way he made most decisions, not with great drama, but with the quiet acceptance of someone who has run the numbers long enough to know what they add up to. He would see where it went, slowly, eyes open. Whatever happened, he would not let Lily get hurt. That was the line that didn't move. They met for coffee 2 Saturdays later, at a place in the middle of the city that was neither her world nor his. A corner shop with mismatched chairs and decent espresso and the ambient noise of a neighborhood going about its business. She arrived 3 minutes before him, which he noticed and which told him something. She was wearing jeans. He almost said something about it. It was the first time he'd seen her in anything other than corporate armor. But he didn't, because it would have sounded like he'd been cataloging her wardrobe, which he had been, though not for reasons he was fully prepared to explain. "Hi," she said. "Hi." They ordered, they sat, and the first 10 minutes had the slight awkwardness of any 2 people meeting in a new context outside the one that originally defined them. The 3-day assignment had given them a specific grammar, a specific shorthand, and now they were building something new, and the construction was visible. "This is strange," she said, after a silence that had gone about 15 seconds past comfortable. "Yeah." In the car it was easier. I think because there was a functional reason for us to be together, and we could hide behind it. "We weren't really hiding," he said. "No," she agreed, "but it was a useful structure." She wrapped her hands around her cup. I don't have a lot of practice with this. The unstructured version. I have dinners that are working dinners and meetings that are social meetings, and my assistant puts them all in the same calendar. This is the first time in a while that I've sat somewhere with no agenda. How does it feel? She considered. Like standing in a room where the furniture's been moved. He nodded. You'll figure out where it is. Is that a promise? It's an observation. He tilted his head. I've never been good at promises about things outside my control. What are you good at promising? He thought about it seriously. That what I say is what I mean. That if I'm in, I'm in. That Lily will always come first, and if that's a problem, I'd rather know early. She held his look. I told you I wanted to meet her. I know. That wasn't a throwaway line. I know that too, he said, which is why I'm taking it seriously instead of just agreeing to make the moment comfortable. She absorbed this. Fair enough. They drank their coffee. Outside, a dog had gotten its leash tangled around a signpost and was looking at the situation with resigned dignity while its owner tried to solve the geometry. Both Nathan and Ava watched this for a moment. The dog eventually sat down in the middle of the problem, apparently deciding that waiting was the appropriate response. Smart dog, Nathan said. Sometimes waiting is the right move, Ava agreed. They looked at each other. How's Rachel? He asked. Rachel had been mentioned enough during the drive that he had a sense of her as a person. Organized, occasionally exasperated, fiercely loyal. Grateful that I rescheduled the afternoon meetings from Haver, and not furious that I rescheduled them. Ava paused. She asked why I rescheduled. I told her the vehicle had a mechanical issue. That's true. It's the part that is true. She turned her cup on the table. She also asked why I looked different when I came back. Different how? She said, and I'm quoting, like someone actually talked to you instead of at you for 2 days. She paused. Rachel's been my assistant for 6 years. She notices things. What did you tell her? I told her the driver was interesting. He raised an eyebrow. Interesting. I was being restrained. She met his look. You know you're significantly more than interesting. Now I feel like you're managing me. A little, she admitted. Old habit, I'm aware of it. He appreciated that. The acknowledgement, the willingness to name the mechanism while it was still running. It was something she did, he'd noticed during the drive. In her better moments, catch herself mid-performance and step out of it. Keep working on it, he said. You're getting better. She looked at him with the expression that wasn't quite offense and wasn't quite amusement. You are the only person on earth who talks to me like this. Is that bad? She thought about it. No, she said. It's deeply uncomfortable and probably good for me. They stayed for another hour. By the end of it, the strangeness had dissolved the way strangeness usually does when two people stop trying to manage it. It just passed through of its own accord, leaving something more ordinary and more real in its place. She walked with him toward the parking garage where he'd left his car, the one with the new brake pads, the one with the car seat in the back, even though Lily was technically a little old for it and had opinions about this. At the garage entrance, they stopped. I want to meet Lily, she said. When you're ready, not before. I know. I mean it, Nathan. I'm not going to push on this. He looked at her for a moment. The afternoon light was doing something to the street that made everything look slightly more significant than it probably was. And he tried to account for that. Tried to see past the good lighting to the actual substance of who was standing in front of him. He saw someone who was trying, who was showing up in jeans on a Saturday without an agenda, who had held a flashlight in the rain for an hour and 40 minutes and not said a word about her shoes, who laughed when she forgot not to. 2 weeks, he said. Let us do this a few more times first, and then, I'll introduce you to Lily. Something moved in her face, quiet and genuine. Okay, she said. He told Lily on a Wednesday night after dinner, during the portion of the evening he privately thought of as the honest hour, when she was fed and not yet tired enough to be emotional, when the defenses of a long school day had dropped and she was just herself. You remember the lady I told you about? He said. From the driving job. Lily looked up from her coloring book. The fancy one. Yes. Kensington, she said. She'd retained the name. Her name is Ava, he said. I've been seeing her a few times, just talking, and I was wondering how you'd feel about meeting her sometime. Lily considered this with the full solemnity she brought to important matters. She colored in 3 more scales on whatever dinosaur she was working on before responding. Is she your girlfriend? She asked. She's my friend, he said carefully. Lily gave him the look. She had a specific look for when adults were being technically accurate in a way that missed the point, and she deployed it now with the precision of a 7-year-old who had been paying close attention to the world. Dad, she said. What? You don't get coffee with your friends. You get coffee from the machine in the kitchen. He opened his mouth and closed it again. Mrs. Dunbar says you need people in your life, Lily continued, returning to her coloring. She says you work too hard and you're lonely and you need to get out more. Mrs. Dunbar said that? She says it to Grandma too. They think I'm not listening. She selected a different crayon. I'm always listening. He sat with this for a moment. So, he said, would you be okay with meeting her? Lily colored for another moment. Is she nice? She asked. Actually nice. Not just nice to you because you're the dad. He thought about the slow Loris photo, and the counter at Maggie's diner, and the laugh that happened before she decided whether to allow it. Actually nice, he said. Lily put her crayon down and looked at him with the directness that still, after 7 years, occasionally startled him. Okay, she said, but Mr. Wrinkles has to meet her too. That's completely reasonable. And if she's mean to Mr. Wrinkles, she won't be. Lily picked up her crayon again, the matter apparently settled. Saturday? She said. Maybe the Saturday after. Fine, she said, with the tone of someone granting a minor concession. He texted Ava that night. She said yes. 2 Saturdays from now. Lunch at the apartment. The response came back in 4 minutes. I'll be there. What does she like to eat? He stared at that question for a moment, not the question itself, the fact that it was the first question. Not what should I bring, or is there somewhere easier, or maybe a restaurant would be better. Just, what does she like to eat? He typed back. Anything dinosaur-shaped, if you can find it. Otherwise, grilled cheese is the official currency of her world. 3 dots appeared. Then, noted. The Saturday arrived the way important Saturdays do. Too fast and too slow at the same time. The week both dragging and vanishing, and then suddenly it was morning, and Nathan was in the kitchen trying to remember whether he'd cleaned the bathroom recently enough, and deciding that he had, and then cleaning it again anyway. Lily was dressed by 8:30, which was unprecedented. She had selected her outfit with the gravity of a state dinner, her good leggings and the yellow shirt with the triceratops on it, which she wore only on occasions she had privately deemed significant. Mr. Wrinkles was similarly prepared, positioned on the couch with what appeared to be intentional dignity. She's coming at noon, Nathan said. I know, Lily said, from the couch beside Mr. Wrinkles. You have 3.5 hours. I'm being ready, Lily said, in the tone of someone who found this observation unnecessary. At 11:58, the buzzer rang. Nathan pressed the intercom. 3rd floor, he said. He heard the street door and then footsteps on the stairs, and then a knock at the apartment door that was neither too soft nor too loud. She'd calibrated it, he realized, the way she calibrated most things, trying to land at exactly right. He opened the door. She was holding a paper bag and wearing the expression of someone who was keeping very careful control over how they appeared. She'd dressed practically. Nothing that would signal the boardroom, nothing that would seem like she was trying too hard to not look like herself. Dark jeans, a soft collared shirt, her hair down, which he hadn't seen before. Hi, she said. Hi. He stepped back. Come in. She came in and immediately stopped because Lily was standing in the middle of the living room with Mr. Wrinkles tucked under one arm, and she was looking at Ava with the specific evaluative intensity that 7-year-olds bring to first meetings with people who matter to their parents. Ava looked at Lily. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Lily said, Is that for us? She was looking at the paper bag. Lily, Nathan said. It's fine, Ava said. She crouched down to Lily's level, without hesitating, without making a performance of it, just going down to where the child was, and held out the bag. I looked it up. I found a cookie cutter in a kitchen store that makes stegosaurus shapes. So these are stegosaurus cookies. Lily took the bag and looked inside it. She looked back at Ava. Those are actually really good stegosaurus shapes, she said seriously. Some of them look like dogs. Some of them look like dogs, Ava agreed. The bakery was doing their best. Lily pulled one out and examined it. The plates along the back were somewhat irregular, and one of the legs was a little long, but the overall stegosaurus character was clear. She handed it back to Ava. This one looks the most like a real stegosaurus, she said. You should have it. Ava took the cookie. She looked at it. She looked at Lily. Thank you, she said. That's very generous. You're welcome. Lily looked at the elephant under her arm and then held it out, the introduction apparently decided upon. This is Mr. Wrinkles. He's an elephant. I can see that, Ava said. He's very distinguished looking. He has opinions, Lily said. What kind of opinions? Food. Mostly food and television. Lily pulled Mr. Wrinkles back and looked at him seriously. He says you seem okay. Tell him I said thank you. Lily relayed this information silently, then nodded at Ava's response from Mr. Wrinkles, which was apparently satisfactory. He says you're welcome. He wants to know if you've ever seen a real elephant. At the zoo, when I was about your age. Ava was still at Lily's level, still holding the stegosaurus cookie. I remember thinking they were much bigger in person than in pictures. They are, Lily confirmed. We went last spring. Dad said the elephant could smell us from far away. That's true. They have an excellent sense of smell. Better than dogs. Actually, yes, much better. Lily looked at Mr. Wrinkles with an expression of vindicated satisfaction, as if this confirmed something the elephant had been saying for a long time and no one had believed. Nathan had been standing in the kitchen doorway watching all of this. He was watching it the way you watch something you were afraid of before it happens, and then it's happening, and you realize the fear was the right size, but the direction was wrong. Not, will this be a disaster? But, what does it mean that it isn't? Ava looked up at him over Lily's head. Just briefly. Just long enough. He looked back at her. He thought, there you are. That's the person who was there the whole time underneath the CEO and the portfolio and the carefully calibrated phone calls, the one who crouches down instead of bending over. The one who takes the cookie that looks the most like a stegosaurus and says thank you, like she means it. He turned back to the kitchen. Grilled cheese in 15 minutes, he said. With the good cheese? Lily asked, already escorting Ava to the couch to show her something. A book, from the looks of it, The Dinosaur Detective 1. With the good cheese, he said. The fancy kind? Ava said to Lily. It's from the regular store, Lily said, with the directness of someone providing accurate information. But Dad does it in butter, so it's better. Everything is better in butter, Ava said, with an authority that apparently satisfied Lily completely, because she settled back against the couch cushions and began explaining the dinosaur detective's most recent case. Nathan stood at the stove and listened to the sound of his daughter explaining a plot about a stolen fossil to a woman who was asking exactly the right questions. Not the questions you ask when you're performing interest in a child, but the ones you ask when you're actually following the story. He buttered the bread. He thought about how you know. Not just that you feel something, but that it's real, that it's the kind of thing that holds up under the weight of actual life. Under brake pads and electric bills and third-floor walk-ups, and 7-year-olds with strong opinions about stegosaurus cookies. He didn't have the full answer yet. He knew that. But he was paying attention, and what he saw, from where he stood at the kitchen stove, was a woman who was not performing anything, who was sitting on a second-hand couch in a small apartment, holding a slightly irregular stegosaurus cookie, listening to a child explain a dinosaur mystery with the look of someone who had found an unexpected thing and recognized it for what it was. That was enough, for now. That was more than enough. He put the sandwiches in the pan and listened to the butter sizzle and waited for the good cheese to melt, and the afternoon stretched out ahead of them, ordinary and new and entirely unscripted, which was the most honest version of any beginning he could have asked for. It was when Ava finally confessed it, not that evening, but 2 weeks later, on a different afternoon when Lily was at his mother's, and it was just the two of them walking along the waterfront, that the air between them changed permanently. They'd been talking about nothing in particular, the easy nothing that had started to come naturally, when she stopped walking and said, "I have to tell you something." He stopped too. "I've been thinking about how to say this correctly," she said, "and I've concluded there isn't a correct way, so I'm just going to say it." He waited. "I'm in love with you." She said it like she'd rehearsed it, but it was still surprising her on the way out. Not in the way people say it when they mean something smaller, in the actual way, the kind that keeps changing how I see everything. She looked at him. "I needed you to know that, whatever you do with it." The water moved beside them. A pair of joggers passed. The city went on in all directions, indifferent and continuous. Nathan looked at her for a long moment. He thought about the night on the mountain, lying in a motel bed, admitting to himself that something had started that hadn't ended. He thought about 2 weeks of coffee and walks and dinners that were just dinners, not performances. He thought about Lily handing her a Stegosaurus cookie and saying, "This one looks the most like a real one. You should have it." He thought about what careful meant. He thought about lines that didn't move. "I know," he said quietly. She blinked. "You know?" "I've known for a while." He turned to look at the water. "I've been waiting until I was sure I could say it back without being afraid of what comes after." She was very still. "Are you?" she said. "Sure?" He turned back to her. "I'm in love with you too," he said. "And I'm terrified because there's Lily, and because I've built something very careful, and you being in it changes the structural load completely. And if something goes wrong, I know. I need you to understand that I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be honest when it gets hard, because it will get hard." He held her look. "And I need you to not disappear. Not the way Carla disappeared. Not even the gentle, slow version." She held his look. "I'm not going to disappear," she said. "You can't know that." "No," she said. "But I'm telling you anyway because it's what I know right now, and I think you deserve to hear it from me directly, not hedged." He looked at her for a long time. Then he reached out and took her hand. She looked down at it, then up at him. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. The water moved. The city went on. Between them, something settled into place. Not perfectly, not without weight, but real and solid and present, the way things are when they're true. The hand-holding lasted about 4 seconds before Ava laughed, a short, nervous sound, and said, "This is terrifying." And Nathan said, "Yes." And they walked the rest of the waterfront in a quiet that was no longer the careful kind, but the kind that comes after something real has been said, and the air needs time to absorb it. That was the beginning of the part that was harder. Not harder because the feeling went away. It didn't. If anything, it intensified in the weeks that followed, the way a frequency becomes clearer once you've tuned to it. It was harder because feelings, Nathan had learned long before this, are the easy part. The easy part is knowing. The hard part is building something out of what you know, brick by brick, in between everything else that doesn't stop for your personal developments. The everything else, in his case, was considerable. There was Lily's school calendar, which in the month of November apparently required parental participation in a volume that suggested the school had forgotten parents had jobs. There was the car, which developed a new issue unrelated to the brake pads, a coolant leak, slow but persistent, that Esteban diagnosed in approximately 45 seconds, and that required $300 Nathan hadn't been planning to spend. There was a scheduling conflict with the dispatch service that cost him a weekend assignment, which cost him money, which required him to pick up an extra shift at the impound lot, which put pressure on 2 other arrangements, and so on down the chain in the specific cascading way that tight logistics tend to fail. Ava had her own version of complicated, which was different in its particulars, but not, it turned out, in its essential texture. She called him on a Wednesday night in mid-November, late, after Lily was in bed. He could hear something in her voice before she said anything specific. A compression. The sound of someone who had been managing something difficult all day and was now at the end of managing it. "Bad day?" he said. "Spectacular day," she said, in the tone that meant the opposite. "Marcus resigned." "Which would be fine. Marcus has been a problem for 8 months, and I've been maneuvering toward his exit for 6 of them. But he resigned in the middle of a client call, which means the client heard it, And now I'm dealing with the client fallout and a board that wants an emergency call Thursday and a PR situation that Rachel is holding together with what I'm pretty sure is pure personal force of will. That's a lot. I haven't eaten since 11. A pause. I keep thinking about the grilled cheese. He smiled despite himself. The regular store cheese. With the butter. He could hear her settling somewhere. A couch, maybe? Shoes coming off? How was your day? Coolant leak? $300? Lily has a school presentation Thursday that I found out about this morning when I saw the reminder note in her backpack, which she has apparently been using as a filing system. What's the presentation on? Prehistoric marine reptiles. A pause. She's branching out from land dinosaurs. She's diversifying her portfolio, apparently. Ava made the sound that was her real laugh. He'd been collecting examples of it since the first time he'd heard it, cataloging the specific triggers, because each one was different, and all of them were real. Does she need help? Ava said. She has opinions about how it should go. I'm functioning as technical support. What does technical support mean in this context? It means I found 3 library books, and I'm not allowed to suggest anything because she already knows what she wants to say, and I'm undermining her creative vision. Ava laughed again. She's 7. She is a fully formed person who happens to also be 7. He stretched out in the kitchen chair. How's the board call going to go? The pause that followed was the calculating kind. Manageable. The board is going to be theatrical, and I'm going to be calm, and then they'll run out of theatrical, and we'll get to the actual problem, which I can solve. She said it not with arrogance, but with the particular confidence of someone who knows her own specific competencies. I've done this before. Then it'll be okay. Yes, she said. It will. Another pause. Nathan. Yeah. Thank you for answering. He understood what she meant. Not just tonight. The pattern. That he answered. That when she called, he picked up. And when she talked, he listened. And when it was bad, he didn't try to fix it or manage it away, but just stayed in it with her, which was the thing she'd had the least of. That's not something you need to thank me for, he said. I know, I'm still thanking you. All right. They stayed on the phone for another 40 minutes after that, not talking constantly, not filling every silence, just occasionally. It was a thing they'd developed, the comfortable presence of the other person in the phone, not demanding anything, just there. He did the dishes. She apparently did something with a report, based on the occasional keyboard sounds. At some point she said, the marine reptile angle is smart. The visuals will be better. Apropos of nothing. And he said, I'll tell her you think so. And she said, don't. She'll know you called me. And he said, she already knows. And there was a pause, and then Ava said, oh, in a tone that meant she was adjusting to something. She's 7, he said. She's not 11. She doesn't have a complex architecture about it. She just knows you're around, and she seems to think that's okay. She said something? She asked if you were coming to Thanksgiving. A longer pause. That's... She stopped. What did you say? I said I'd ask you. The silence this time was different. He could feel her in it, feeling the weight of the question, which was not just a dinner invitation, but something considerably larger. The crossing of a threshold. The place where something that had been carefully incremental became suddenly a lot more real. Nathan, she said carefully, if I come to Thanksgiving, I know. That's a family thing. I know what Thanksgiving is, Ava. I'm saying... She stopped again. He waited. I don't want to take something lightly that isn't liked. I know, he said. That's why I'm asking instead of assuming. She was quiet for a moment, then... Would your mother be there? Yes. Would she... My mother is going to like you, he said. She's going to like you more than me for the first 2 hours, and it's going to be embarrassing. How do you know that? Because you remind me of her in exactly the ways she finds flattering. He paused. And because I told her about you and she said, and I'm quoting, finally. Another silence. Then Ava said, she said finally? She has opinions about my social life. Apparently. He could hear something in her voice, Not quite vulnerability, but the place adjacent to it. The place where someone stands when they're about to let something matter that they'd been keeping at arm's length. Okay, she said. Okay, yes. I'll come to Thanksgiving. Good. What do I bring? Wine, he said, and anything you want. My mother will tell you you didn't have to and then be delighted by whatever you brought. I can work with that. He smiled at the ceiling. Go eat something, he said. The Marcus situation will still be there tomorrow. I know. A pause. Good night, Nathan. Good night. Well, Thanksgiving was its own kind of test, and it started badly. Not catastrophically. Nothing collapsed, no one cried, no dishes were broken. But his mother's apartment was smaller than anyone remembered, and his Aunt Patricia arrived 40 minutes early with her husband Gerald and their adult son Derek, who worked in insurance and had a specific talent for asking questions that sounded like conversation but were actually interrogation. And Lily had been wound tight all morning from excitement and had peaked at 11 a.m. and was now, by noon, hovering in the volatile territory between overstimulated and overtired. Ava arrived at 12:15, exactly when she said she would, with 2 bottles of wine and a pie from a bakery that was clearly not an ordinary bakery and that his mother received with the delight he'd predicted and the disclaimer he'd predicted. You didn't have to, his mother said. I wanted to, Ava said. His mother looked at her for approximately 3 seconds and then looked at Nathan with an expression that said, clearly and without words, yes, this one, keep this one. Nathan introduced her around. Patricia was warm and immediate, the way Patricia was about everything. Gerald shook her hand and mentioned the stock market, because Gerald mentioned the stock market with everyone. Derek looked at her with the particular alertness of someone who had recognized her name and was assembling contextual information. Kensington, Derek said. Meridian Capital, Kensington? That's me, she said pleasantly, without elaborating. I follow your firm's quarterly notes. He straightened slightly. The Brennan call last year. The position you took on. Can we talk about it after dinner? She said. I'm trying to take a day off. She said it without edge, without the corporate precision she used to shut down conversations she found unproductive. Just, not today. Derek blinked and nodded, and the conversation moved on. And Nathan, who had been watching from across the room, felt something ease in his chest. Lily had been hovering near Ava since she'd arrived, caught between wanting to be close and the pride of a 7-year-old who didn't want to seem too eager. She'd planted herself on the arm of the couch nearest to where Ava was standing, and she was holding Mr. Wrinkles and watching with the patience of a naturalist observing something in the wild. Ava noticed. She'd been noticing since she walked in. At a natural pause in the adult conversation, she turned to Lily and said, How did the marine reptile presentation go? Lily's face changed entirely. I got to bring pictures, she said. I found a Chronosaurus in one of the library books, and Mrs. Pedersen said it was the best primary source material she'd seen all semester. What's a Chronosaurus? Lily's expression shifted into the gear she reserved for explaining things to people who needed educating. She set Mr. Wrinkles on the couch cushion, slid down from the arm, and began talking. And Ava sat down on the couch beside Mr. Wrinkles and listened with the same quality of attention she'd given the dinosaur detective Mystery. Really listening, tracking the thread, asking the question that was 3 sentences back, and Lily's whole body relaxed the way a 7-year-old's body relaxes when an adult is taking her seriously. Nathan's mother appeared at his shoulder. Don't blow this, she said quietly. Thanks, Mom. I mean it. She's not what I expected. What did you expect? His mother considered. Someone who was trying harder to impress us. He looked at Ava on the couch, who had apparently been recruited to hold Mr. Wrinkles while Lily used both hands to demonstrate the jaw span of a Chronosaurus. She's not trying to impress anyone, he said. His mother patted his arm once and went back to the kitchen. The hard conversation happened in January. Not one hard conversation. That would have been easier. It was a series of them, spread across 3 weeks, arriving without warning in the middle of otherwise ordinary exchanges. The kind of conversations you have when a relationship moves past the early phase, past the period where both people are still being careful, and into the territory where the real friction is. The first one was about time. He'd had a week where three things went wrong in rapid succession. The coolant issue had required a second visit to the shop, Lily had a stomach bug that kept her home from school 2 days, and an assignment he'd been counting on through the dispatch service was canceled at the last minute by the client. He was tired and running short on margin in every direction, and Ava had suggested they spend Saturday evening together, and he'd agreed, and then Saturday afternoon he'd had to cancel because the second shop visit had run 4 hours instead of 2, and he still had to get groceries, and Lily needed a bath, and he had nothing left. He texted her at 4:30. "I can't tonight. Car situation ran long. I'm sorry." The response came quickly. "Okay, tomorrow?" He didn't have tomorrow either. He didn't have the bandwidth to explain why in a text, and he didn't have the energy for the phone call that would do it properly, and so he said, "Maybe, I'll let you know," which was the wrong thing, and he knew it when he sent it. She called Sunday morning. "I'm not angry," she said, as her opening, which was the sentence of someone who was at least a little angry. "I know I handled Friday badly," he said. "You handled it fine. The cancellation was fine. The maybe I'll let you know was..." A pause. "I don't need you to have every night free. I understand your schedule, but when you go quiet like that, it feels like I've done something wrong and I'm waiting to find out what." He sat down. He hadn't had coffee yet. Lily was watching something in her room and he'd closed his door. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said. "I know that. I'm telling you how it feels, not what's true." She paused. "I grew up in a house where people went quiet when something was wrong and you learned to read the silence. I know I need to work on my reaction to it, but I need you to work on telling me when you're at the edge." He rubbed his face. "When I'm at the edge, I don't have capacity to tell anyone I'm at the edge. That's what the edge means." "I know. I'm not asking for a detailed account. I'm asking for one text. Something that says I'm drowning right now, not anything you did." He thought about this. She wasn't wrong. He'd learned, with Carla, to become self-contained when things were hard, to manage it internally because asking for help had never worked, had sometimes made things worse. The self-containment had become a habit, and habits don't distinguish between the person who made them necessary and the person who didn't. "Okay," he said. "I can do that. I can also do better," she said. "With the calling, when I can hear you're tired. I push through it sometimes because I want to talk to you, and I don't stop to ask if it's a good time." "It's always a good time," he said. "Nathan, it's usually a good time," he said. "And when it's not, I'll say so." She was quiet for a moment. "This is hard," she said. "Yes. I don't mean us. I mean the logistics of us, the actual mechanics." "Yeah." He leaned back in the chair. "I know. My life doesn't have a lot of flex in it. I know that." A pause. "I've been thinking about it. I'm restructuring my weekly schedule. I'm going to protect 2 evenings minimum, completely off calendar, no client dinners, no calls. Not because you asked me to, because I realized I needed to regardless, and this is the additional reason to actually do it." He looked at the ceiling. "You don't have to." "I told you I was going to change my priorities," she said. "I don't say things I don't mean." He thought about the waterfront. "I'm not going to disappear." She'd meant that too. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me. It's also good for me." A pause. "Can I come over this afternoon?" "Not for anything. I'll bring food. We can watch whatever Lily wants, which I'm anticipating is something involving prehistoric animals." "It's going to be the marine documentary." "I've seen worse." He smiled at the ceiling. "Yeah, come over." The second hard conversation was about who they were to each other in public. It surfaced at an industry event in late January that Ava had mentioned offhandedly and that Nathan had, almost to his own surprise, attended. She'd said she wasn't expecting him to, had said it specifically, and he'd found himself saying he'd come because she'd been to Thanksgiving and the Marine documentary and 3 school pickups in November when his schedule had required it, and it seemed like the right thing. He'd worn his good jacket. It was the right jacket for the room. Not the best jacket in the room, but appropriate, which was a distinction that mattered less to him than it might have, but that he'd been aware of walking in. She'd introduced him to people. 3 people over the course of the evening, in the specific choreography of these events where introductions happen in transit between conversations. To the first, she said, "This is Nathan, a friend." To the second, something similar. To the third, a woman named Christine who had an executive presence that suggested she ran something significant. She said, "Nathan Reed," and let Christine draw her own conclusion, which Christine apparently did, and which led to a conversation about something else entirely. In the car afterward, his car, the one with the fixed coolant and the new brake pads, she was quiet for longer than usual. "You met a lot of people tonight," he said. "I meet a lot of people at these things. Most of them I'll have forgotten by Thursday." "Is that how it works?" "Mostly." She looked out the window. "I introduced you badly." He glanced over. "Christine noticed," she said. "Christine notices everything. She's going to ask me about it this week, and I'm going to have to explain what I was doing." "What were you doing?" She was quiet. "Ava." "I don't know," she said, and the honesty in it was uncomfortable. The way honesty is when you've caught yourself at something you hadn't fully acknowledged yet. "I think I was trying to protect something, or protect you, or protect—" She stopped. "I'm used to my professional life and my private life being completely separate. I've kept them separate for 15 years because every time they've overlapped, something has gone wrong. This isn't the same thing." "I know." "You're embarrassed of me," he said. Not accusatory, just putting it on the table to see if that's what it was. "No." She said it fast and she meant it. "Nathan, no, that's not—" She turned to look at him. "You are the best person I've met in longer than I can remember. I am not embarrassed of you." "Then what?" She leaned her head back. "I'm afraid," she said, "of what happens to what we have when it becomes public, when people have opinions about it, when the gap between us becomes legible." She paused. "When someone points at us and starts doing the math." He drove for a moment. "Someone's going to do the math regardless," he said. "The question is whether you let that change anything." "I know." "And?" She turned to look at him. "And it doesn't," she said. "It doesn't change anything. I just needed to say it out loud so you could hear it, and it could stop being the thing I was managing by myself." He nodded. "Okay," he said. "Okay. I would have liked to be the person I'm with instead of a friend," he said plainly. "Not for ego, just because it's true." She closed her eyes briefly. "I know. I'm sorry. Don't do it again." "I won't." She said it with the same quality she'd said I'm not going to disappear. Not easy certainty, but the hard-won kind, the kind that costs something. "The next event is the Hartwell dinner in February. I'll introduce you correctly." "Good." She reached over and put her hand on his arm. Just briefly, just the weight of it. "Thank you for coming tonight. You said you weren't expecting me to." "I wasn't." She looked at him. "That made it better, not worse." He turned into her building's street. She had the doorman who knew her name, the lobby that cost more per square foot than his entire floor, the architecture of their different lives, visible and concrete. He pulled up to the curb. She didn't get out immediately. "Come up," she said. He'd been inside her apartment twice, both times for reasons that were specific and brief. Both times he'd felt the specific arithmetic of the difference. The space, the view, the absence of a third-floor walk-up, and a parking lot and a broken gas station sign. He'd also felt, both times, that she was someone slightly less herself in that space than she was in other spaces, like she fit it perfectly, but it didn't entirely fit her, and she hadn't noticed yet. "Not tonight," he said. "Lily's at my mother's, and I should pick her up before 9. She nodded. She got her bag together. At the door she paused and looked back at him. "Nathan," she said, "I know this isn't simple. Nothing worth it usually is. I mean, specifically, I know what I'm asking you to navigate. The world's thing, the gap thing. I know it's real, and I know it's not fair, and I know there will be people who do the math and say it out loud." He held her look. "Let them," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she got out of the car, and he watched her go through the lobby door, and he sat for a moment before pulling out into the street, thinking about worlds and gaps and the particular stubbornness of caring about someone enough to stop measuring the distance and just cover it. He picked up Lily from his mother's at 8:50. She was asleep in the guest room, and he carried her to the car in her coat, Mr. Wrinkles tucked under his arm. She didn't fully wake up. She made a small sound when he buckled her in and then settled back against the seat with the total trust of a sleeping child. He drove home through the city, his daughter breathing softly in the back seat, the streets lit and quiet in the way that late-night January streets are, and he thought about Ava saying, "I'm afraid," and meaning it. He thought about fear and what it was worth, the kind that protected you from real things and the kind that just kept you from them. He thought about February, the Hartwell dinner, being introduced correctly. He thought about the small, deliberate architecture of a life built alongside someone, instead of parallel to them, the difference between those two arrangements, and how much of it came down to the willingness to occupy the same room, publicly, without hedging. He was willing. He had been willing for a while. He was waiting, now, for the rest of it to catch up with itself. He pulled into the parking lot, carried Lily up 3 flights of stairs without waking her, tucked her into bed. Mr. Wrinkles went in after her, positioned correctly by habit now. His habit, not Lily's, because he'd learned the requirement. He stood in her doorway in the dark. In the morning, she would ask about Ava. She asked most mornings, not always directly. Sometimes she asked by mentioning something Ava had said the last time she'd seen her, or by asking when they'd go to the waterfront again, the 3 of them. She'd taken to the 3 of them configuration with the naturalness of a child who doesn't see why anything should be complicated, which was both the simplest and the most clarifying thing about it. He went to bed. He didn't lie there long. He was tired in the good way, not the depleted way that had been his normal for 3 years, but the way that comes from a full day that included things that mattered. He closed his eyes. Whatever was coming, it was coming for all 3 of them. He thought that was finally exactly right. The Hartwell dinner was in the 2nd week of February, and Ava introduced him as the person I'm with, exactly as she'd said she would. She said it to 4 people over the course of the evening. To Christine, who gave Ava a look that was both knowing and approving. To the Hartwell senior partner and his wife, who were gracious and incurious. To a woman named Petra, from a competing firm, who clearly did the math and whose expression shifted through several calculations before settling on pleasant neutrality. Ava didn't modify the introduction for any of them. She didn't hedge or add qualifiers or create distance between the words and what they meant. Nathan shook hands and made conversation and didn't feel like a footnote. That was the part he hadn't fully anticipated, that being introduced correctly would feel like something. He thought of it as a reasonable thing to ask for, a logical correction to what had happened at the January event. He hadn't expected it to feel, in the specific moment Ava said the person I'm with, and didn't look away from him when she said it, like a door opening into a room he hadn't known he was standing outside of. On the drive home, she said, "How was that?" "Better," he said. "Better than January." Significantly, she looked at her window. "Christine told me at the bar that she's never seen me look comfortable at one of these things before." "What did you say?" "I said I was going to start protecting Tuesday and Thursday evenings and see if it helped." She paused. She said she hoped his name was interesting and then walked away before I could answer. Nathan glanced over. "What's Christine's deal?" "She's known me for 9 years. She watched me go through a relationship that ended very badly and another one that ended quietly but was almost worse, and she's been politely concerned about me ever since." Ava turned from the window. "She liked you." "She barely talked to me." "But Christine talks to people she doesn't like at length. She talked to you for 3 minutes, and that means she liked you." She paused. "She also Googled you during the cocktail hour." "How do you know?" "Because she came back and said, 'I looked him up,' in the same tone she'd used to say, 'I looked at your portfolio and the fundamentals are solid.'" Ava's mouth curved. "Christine evaluates people the way I do. I used to find it reassuring. Tonight I found it slightly irritating, which means it was about me and not about her." He drove for a moment. "What did she find?" "LinkedIn with your old engineering program listed. The dispatch service profile, which is apparently public-facing. A mention in a local trade publication from 3 years ago about an impound lot procedural improvement you apparently suggested, and they implemented." She paused. She said, quote, "He fixes things. That's not nothing." Nathan considered this. "She's not wrong," he said. "No," Ava agreed. "She's not." Spring arrived the way springs do in the city. Not all at once, but in increments, the temperature changing in the mornings first, then the light, and eventually the trees in the park sending out the cautious early green. That means the worst is probably over. Lily noticed it first, the way she noticed most things, immediately, and with the specific authority of someone who had been expecting it. The trees are starting, she told Nathan at breakfast one morning in March. I saw one on the way to school yesterday. One tree? One that had already started. The others are coming. She ate her cereal with the confidence of someone delivering reliable intelligence. Ava said we could go to the botanical garden when it gets warm. Did she? She said there's a section with prehistoric plant species. Lily looked up. I think she's been researching. He looked at his daughter across the kitchen table. 7 years old, dinosaur pajamas, Mr. Wrinkles propped against the cereal box in his usual morning position. He thought about the person who had mapped out a botanical garden visit around prehistoric plant species and how that was both very Ava and also something that the Ava of 8 months ago, the one who came out of the Meridian Hotel checking her phone, would not have done. Not because she was incapable of it, because it wouldn't have occurred to her that there was a person whose interests were worth researching for. She's been researching, he confirmed. Lily nodded, satisfied, and returned to her cereal. He texted Ava that morning. Lily told me about the botanical garden. 3 minutes. Prehistoric plant species. I found a section with living cycads. They're practically unchanged from the Jurassic. She's going to lose her mind. He smiled at the phone. He typed, You researched living cycads. Her response, I may have gone down a rabbit hole at 11 p.m. last Tuesday. Don't read into it. He typed, I'm reading into it. A pause. Then, fine. Read into it. Bash. The hard thing, when it came from a direction he hadn't been watching. It was early April, a Tuesday, and Lily had a half day at school. Nathan had arranged to pick her up at noon and take her to the library, a standing tradition, the library run, which Lily treated with the gravity of a diplomatic mission. He was at the impound lot finishing up a morning shift when his phone rang. The number was area code 602. Phoenix. He almost didn't answer. He stood in the parking lot of the impound lot and looked at the number for 3 rings, and then picked up because not answering was also a choice, and he'd learned that not answering didn't make anything go away. Nathan. Carla's voice was 3 years older than the last time he'd heard it, which was at a brief, careful phone call when Lily had her tonsils out and Carla had called to ask how it went. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. It's okay, he said, because it was. Not comfortable, but okay. What's going on? I'm going to be in the city next month. A pause. My company's relocating me back east. I'm going to be about 40 minutes from you. He was very still. 40 minutes, he said. I know. Her voice had the quality of someone who had rehearsed this call and was now finding that the rehearsed version was not the one she was having. I wanted to call you before it happened. I didn't want Lily to run into me at a grocery store or something. That seemed worse. Yeah, he said. That would have been worse. A pause. How is she? Carla said. He thought about how to answer that. The honest answer was long and recent and would take more than a parking lot conversation. He gave her the version that was accurate. She's doing well, reading above grade level now. She's into marine reptiles at the moment. Marine reptiles. A soft sound that might have been a laugh. She got that from you, the animal thing. Possibly. Another pause. I'm not calling to... I don't have any claim, Carla said. I know that. I'm not going to show up expecting anything. I just thought you should know. I'll tell Lily, he said, when the time is right. I'm not going to hide it from her. No, of course. A pause. Is she... Carla stopped, started again. Does she ask about me? He thought about it honestly. The honest answer was, sometimes, less than she used to, and always with a 7-year-old's pragmatism that was harder to watch than any anger would have been. Sometimes, he said. Carla was quiet for a moment. He could hear something in it that wasn't his responsibility to manage, but that he recognized nonetheless. The The weight of absence when you're the one who chose to be absent. Okay, she said. Thank you for answering. Take care of yourself, Carla. He hung up. He stood in the parking lot for a moment and looked at the sky and then called Ava. She picked up on the second ring. He could hear office sounds in the background. Are you between things? He said. The office sound stopped. She'd moved. I am now. What happened? He told her. Flat, factual, the way he processed hard news, out loud, in order, without editorializing until he'd gotten through the facts. She listened without interrupting, which was one of the things he'd come to depend on. When he finished, there was a brief silence. How are you? She said. I don't know yet. He leaned against the side of his car. I need to process it. I'm picking up Lily at noon, and I'm not going to have processed it by noon. You don't have to have processed it by noon. You just have to pick her up and take her to the library. I know. Nathan. Her voice was careful and present. You've built something solid. Lily is fine. Carla being 40 minutes away changes the geography, but it doesn't change what you've built. He thought about that. What if Lily wants to see her? He said. Then you navigate that when it comes. You don't navigate it today. A pause. And you don't navigate it alone. He closed his eyes briefly. No, he said. I know. I'll come over tonight, if you want. Yes, he said. I want. Okay, go get Lily. Go to the library. Let her pick 8 books she doesn't need. She always picks 8. I know, let her. A pause. I'll bring food, something better than grilled cheese. Lily would dispute the better than grilled cheese part. Then I'll also bring grilled cheese. He heard the almost laugh. Go! He went. He told Ava the full version that night. After Lily was in bed, both of them at the kitchen table with the remains of the dinner she'd brought. Real food from the place 3 blocks over that Lily had declared acceptable after a 2-visit evaluation process. He told Ava the things he hadn't said on the phone, the specific texture of hearing Carla's voice, the complicated arithmetic of his feelings about it, the fear that sat underneath the practical questions. The fears that Lily gets attached again and then gets dropped again, he said. Not necessarily that Carla intends that, but Carla doesn't always follow through on her intentions, and Lily's old enough now that she'd understand it in a way she didn't at 4. Ava was quiet for a moment. That's a real fear, she said. It's not catastrophizing. No. What do you want to do? I want to protect Lily from everything forever, he said, which is not an option. He turned his coffee cup on the table. So I want to take it slow, see if Carla is actually here, actually consistent before I introduce the possibility to Lily. And then let Lily decide, at an age-appropriate level, what she wants. Ava nodded. That sounds right. You don't have to agree with everything I say. I know, I actually agree with this. She paused. Can I say something that might be hard to hear? He looked at her. Lily is going to be okay regardless of what Carla does, she said carefully, because of you, because of what you've built, and because... She stopped for a half second. Because she has people around her who aren't going anywhere. He held her look. That's what you meant, he said. Not going anywhere. That's what I meant. He reached across the table. She put her hand in his. They sat like that for a while. In the kitchen of the 3rd-floor apartment with the parking lot view and the folder of bills above the stove and the nightlight visible down the hall, and neither of them needed to say anything else about it because they'd said the part that mattered. Carla arrived in the city in May. She texted, which Nathan had told her to do. She was careful about it. Not too frequent, not demanding, just present in the way someone is when they're trying to demonstrate that they're going to be there without saying it outright. He watched for 6 weeks. She texted twice in the first week, and then not for 10 days, and then once more. She didn't push for information. She asked about Lily's interests, and he gave brief answers, and she sent a small package, a book about plesiosaurs, to his address, with a card that said, I saw this and thought of her. He held that book for a long time before he brought it in from the mailbox. He showed it to Lily and said it was from someone who used to know her when she was little. Lily looked at the book. She looked at Nathan. She was 7.5 by then, and she was perceptive in a way that still occasionally surprised him. "My mom?" she said. He was very still. "What makes you say that?" "Because Mrs. Dunbar has a picture of her mom who's in California, and she said sometimes moms go far away, and sometimes they come back." She turned the plesiosaur book over in her hands. "And you've been checking your phone different." He sat down on the couch beside her. "Yes," he said. "She's moved back. She lives about 40 minutes from here now." Lily was quiet, looking at the book. "Does she want to see me?" she said. "I think so, but there's no pressure. Nothing has to happen until you're ready, and nothing has to happen at all if you don't want it to." "Do you want it to happen?" He thought about how to answer that honestly at a level a 7-year-old could receive. "I want you to have whatever you need," he said, "and I want to make sure anything that happens is good for you. So we're going to go slowly and carefully, and you're going to tell me how you feel, and we'll figure it out together." Lily looked at the plesiosaur book for a moment longer. "She picked a good book," she said finally. "She did. Can I put it with the others?" "Of course." She went to her room to shelve it, and Nathan sat on the couch for a minute with the specific exhaustion of parenthood in its honest form. Not resentment, never that, but the weight of making decisions that have consequences you can't fully see, for a person you love more than the capacity of the word. He was still sitting there when Ava came in. She had a key by then. He'd given it to her in March, quietly, without announcement, setting it on the counter while she was looking for something and not making a ceremony of it. She'd picked it up and put it in her bag and said thank you, and they'd both pretended it was a small thing when it was not. She looked at him on the couch. "How'd it go?" she said. "She knew," he said. "Before I said anything, she knew." Ava sat down beside him. "What did she say?" "She said the book was a good choice." He leaned his head back. "She's going to be fine." "She's going to be fine," Ava agreed. "She's your kid." He looked over at her. "She's also starting to be yours," he said. Ava went very still. He hadn't planned to say it. It was one of those things that came out because it was true, and the moment was the kind of moment where true things find their way to the surface without waiting for permission. She looked at him. There was something in her face that was raw and unguarded. Not the vulnerable adjacent look from earlier months, but the real version. The kind that happens when someone says a thing you've been wanting and not letting yourself want. "Is that—" She stopped. "Do you mean that?" "I watch her with you," he said. "The botanical garden, the plesiosaur explanations. Last week when she was upset about the spelling test and she came to you first." He paused. "She comes to you first sometimes. Not instead of me. In addition. That's not nothing. That's actually everything." Ava's eyes had gone bright in the way that meant she was keeping something in check. "I don't want to overstep," she said. "You're not." He turned toward her. "You haven't been, not once. You've moved at her pace, not yours, and that took something, because you're not a patient person by nature, and you chose to be patient for her." "She made it easy," Ava said. "She's not. She's so easy to love, Nathan. I didn't expect it to happen so fast, and then it just did, and I've been trying not to put words on it because I didn't want to make it weird." "It's not weird," he said. "It's right." She looked at him for a long moment. "What does this mean?" she said. "Going forward. What does this look like?" He'd been thinking about this for weeks, in the honest hour after Lily went to bed, in the long drives and the margin spaces. He'd been thinking about it the way he thought about things that mattered. Not avoiding the weight of them, but carrying it around until he understood its shape. "It means I want you here," he said, "not 40 minutes away with a key for occasional visits. Here. In this life, the actual daily life, with the coolant leaks and the third-floor walk-up, and the 8 library books every Tuesday." He paused. "I know what you're walking away from. I know what I'm asking." "You're not asking," she said quietly. "I'm already here." He looked at her. "I renegotiated my lease," she said. 2 months ago. I'm in a month-to-month now." She watched his face. "I'm not telling you that as a pressure. I'm telling you because you said you wanted me to be honest when things are hard, and when things are real. And this is real. He was quiet for a moment. Month to month, he said. I'm not going to keep a penthouse I never want to be in when there's somewhere I actually want to be. She held his look. If you're not ready, I'm ready, he said. Are you sure? Ava. He reached up and touched her face. I've been ready. I've been waiting for you to catch up. She laughed. The real one, the surprised kind. I've been ready for months. I know. I was enjoying watching you get there. That's... She shook her head, still laughing. That's infuriating. You got there, he said. That's what matters. She moved in on a Saturday in June, which Lily had chosen from the options offered. Saturday was the only acceptable option, she'd explained, because that was the most time she'd have to supervise the process. The supervision was comprehensive. Lily stood in the living room as each box arrived and directed its placement with the authority of a general overseeing a logistical operation. Nathan and Ava's colleague from the office, a good-natured man named Dom, who'd volunteered with the energy of someone who didn't know what he was getting into, carried boxes up the 3 flights and were redirected by Lily with calm regularity. That one goes in the study, Lily would say. No, the other corner. That corner has better light. Dom, by the 3rd floor, had begun responding to Lily's instructions with a yes, ma'am, that made Nathan bite down on a smile every time. Ava had brought less than Nathan expected. She'd said once that the penthouse had never felt like a home, just an address, and he understood that better now, seeing what she'd actually chosen to bring. Books. Many of them. A particular lamp. Kitchen things. The good ones. The ones that suggested someone who actually cooked, which had surprised him until she'd mentioned that cooking was something she'd done before it got crowded out by the company. A few pieces of art that were not the corporate, tasteful, inoffensive art he might have guessed, but stranger and more personal. And in a box clearly labeled in her handwriting, Lily's things, from me. He didn't ask about it. He carried it to the room Lily had designated and set it down. Later, when the moving was done and Dom had been thanked and fed and sent home, Lily opened the box with the seriousness of a conservator handling something irreplaceable. Inside was a careful curation, 2 books about prehistoric ocean life, one about cycades specifically, a small wooden elephant that was clearly meant as company for Mr. Wrinkles, a framed photograph, printed, of the 3 of them at the botanical garden, Lily in front of a cycad fern, Nathan behind her with his hand on her shoulder, Ava beside him, and all 3 of them looking at whatever Lily had been pointing at off frame, so none of them were looking at the camera, so it looked real instead of posed. Lily held the photograph and looked at it for a long time. When did you take this? She asked. My phone, Ava said. I set a timer. You planned it. I wanted to have it. Lily looked at the photograph. Then she looked at Ava. Can this go on my bookshelf? She said. It's yours, Ava said. You can put it wherever you want. Lily carried it to her room with both hands, carefully, the way she carried things that mattered. Nathan watched her go. He looked at Ava, who was watching Lily's door. You're going to wreck me, he said quietly. She turned. What? You planned a photograph at the botanical garden so you'd have a picture of all 3 of us. She looked at him. You do things like that all the time. The library Tuesdays, the 8 books. You build things deliberately because you know they matter. I'm learning from you. He didn't have an answer for that. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me. She moved to stand beside him. I'm exactly where I want to be. Hush. The question came in August, on an evening so ordinary that it would not have been remarkable for any reason except for what happened in it. Nathan was at the stove. Ava was at the table with her laptop, working on something she'd been trying to finish for the better part of an hour. Lily was on the couch, ostensibly doing reading homework, but actually also intermittently coaching Mr. Wrinkles on the correct way to sit. The dinner was pasta, nothing elaborate, the kind of weeknight dinner that gets made because everyone is tired and pasta is what there is. The kitchen was the particular warm of a summer evening with the windows cracked, and the ambient sound was the city and Lily's occasional instructions to Mr. Wrinkles and the tap of Ava's keyboard and the sound of the water starting to boil. Completely ordinary. And then Lily put down her book and her elephant and looked at Ava with the specific directness of a 7-year-old who has been thinking about something for a while and has decided now is the time. "Ava," she said. Ava looked up from her laptop. "Yeah? Can you be my mom?" The kitchen went completely quiet. The water on the stove continued to boil. Ava's hands went still on the keyboard. Nathan turned from the stove. He was very still. Lily was looking at Ava with the absolute, uncalculating openness of someone who had simply asked the thing she meant to ask, and she was waiting, not anxiously, just waiting, the way she waited for most things, with the patience of someone who trusted that the world would give her a real answer. Ava looked at Lily. Nathan watched Ava's face move through something that had no clean name. Not surprise exactly, though she hadn't expected it in this moment, on this Tuesday evening, over pasta. Not just emotion, though her eyes had gone bright immediately. Something more like the specific arrival of a thing you'd been holding in your hands without knowing what it was, and then suddenly knowing. "Why do you ask?" Ava said. Her voice was very steady. The steadiness cost something. Lily considered this. "Because you live here," she said, "and you know where I keep Mr. Wrinkle's spare ear. And you came to the school thing in May even though it was on a Thursday, and you always have things on Thursdays." She looked down at Mr. Wrinkles and then back up. "And because I want you to." Ava was quiet for a moment. "Your dad and I would need to talk about it," she said carefully. "Because it's a big thing, and big things need to be talked about carefully." "I know," Lily said, "but if you talk about it, and you decide yes, is that okay? That I asked?" Ava looked at her. Nathan watched Ava and thought, there it is. The person who drove 40 minutes in January ice to be at a school event on a Thursday. The one who researched psycads at 11 p.m. The one who put a photograph in a box labeled Lily's Things from me because she wanted Lily to have it in her room. "Yes," Ava said. Her voice had lost some of its steadiness, just a little. "It's very okay that you asked." Lily nodded, satisfied, the way she nodded when things were resolved. She picked up Mr. Wrinkles and went back to her reading homework. Ava looked at Nathan. He looked back at her. He turned down the pasta. He walked over to the table, and he pulled out the chair beside her and sat down, and he looked at her properly in the warm kitchen light with the summer evening coming through the windows. "Well," he said. "Well," she said. She swiped quickly at one eye with the back of her hand, which she did efficiently and without acknowledging. "That was, yeah." "She knows where Mr. Wrinkles keeps his spare ear," Ava said. "Second drawer in the nightstand," Nathan said. "She told you where she put it." She explained the whole system. Ava looked at the table for a moment. I didn't know she'd been thinking about it as a category. She thinks about everything. She's just quiet about it until she decides." Ava looked up at him. "What do you think?" He held her look. "I think she asked you exactly the right question. I think she asked it because she already knows the answer she wants." He paused. "I think the question is whether you're ready for what the yes means." "I've been ready," she said. "I told you in June I was ready." "The move is different from the name." She was quiet for a moment. "I know. The name is a commitment I don't take lightly." "I know you don't." "I'm not her mother," she said carefully. "I know that. Carla is her mother, and Lily knows that, and the visits are going cautiously, but they're going, and I don't want to put myself in a role that—" "Ava," he said her name simply. "Lily understands more than we give her credit for. She's not confused about who Carla is. She's not confused about what she's asking." "What is she asking?" He thought about how his daughter had phrased it. Not will you be, but can you be? Not claiming something, asking for permission to have it. "She's asking if she's allowed to love you as much as she already does," he said. "She's asking for the word to match the feeling." Ava looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Lily on the couch, who was reading intently, Mr. Wrinkles correctly positioned. Then she looked back at Nathan. "Yes," she said. "The answer is yes." He took her hand on the table. She turned it over and held it. "We'll figure out what the title looks like," he said. "We'll let Lily lead. There's no formula for it." "I know." She squeezed his hand. I'm good with no formula. Since when? Since a mountain road in October taught me that improvising sometimes gets you further than the plan. He looked at her. You remember that, he said. I remember all of it. She met his look steadily. The diner, the flashlight, the motel at the bottom of the hill. I remember exactly what it felt like to drive back into the city and know that something had changed and not know yet what to do about it. She paused. I remember deciding to call you. I remember how my hands were cold and I dialed anyway. Your hands were cold? It was November and I was nervous. She said it plainly, without apology. I'm not someone who gets nervous. I get prepared. But I didn't have a way to prepare for calling a person and saying, I want to see you because you changed something in me that I don't know how to change back. Nathan looked at her. He thought about that first Saturday across the table, the strangeness of a different context, furniture in the wrong place. He thought about her saying, this is terrifying on the waterfront, and him saying yes. He thought about every hard conversation and every honest one and every Tuesday evening and the photograph in the botanical garden. You could have said that, he said. I know. I said a shorter version. Next time say the whole version. This is the whole version, she said. Across the room, Lily put down her homework. Dad, she said, is the pasta ready? 2 minutes, he said. Mr. Wrinkles is hungry. Mr. Wrinkles can wait 2 minutes. Lily communicated this to Mr. Wrinkles with a look. Mr. Wrinkles apparently accepted it. Nathan got up to finish the pasta, and Ava set the table. She knew where everything was, had known for months, had built the knowledge gradually the way you build fluency in a language, until one day you stop translating and just speak. And Lily relocated from the couch to her kitchen stool with Mr. Wrinkles, and the three of them had dinner in the way they'd been having dinner for the last several months. Not perfectly, not without the ordinary frictions of people living together, but genuinely, with the real sound of real conversation and the specific warmth of a kitchen that knew it was being used. He said, this is what nobody tells you about the way a life changes. It doesn't announce itself. The moments that rearrange everything don't always arrive with music or weather or dramatic speeches. Sometimes they arrive as a $950 driving assignment you took because the electric bill was late. Sometimes they arrive as a woman checking her phone in your rearview mirror, not yet the person she's going to become to you. Sometimes they arrive as a storm on a mountain road, or a slow loris photo at 8:15 at night, or a stegosaurus cookie that looks more like a dog than a stegosaurus, and you give it to a stranger because it's the best one. Nathan had spent 3 years building a careful life. Carefully, deliberately, brick by brick, measuring everything twice because he couldn't afford to get it wrong. He'd confused careful with closed. He'd confused protecting Lily with not letting anything in that might reach her, and those aren't the same thing. And the difference cost him something until Ava Kensington walked out of a hotel and climbed into the back seat and refused to be invisible in the way he'd been told to be. What he learned, somewhere between the mountain road and the kitchen table, is that the right person doesn't make your life easier. That's not what they do. The right person makes your life more fully itself. They take the dimensions that were already there, and they give them room to be what they were always trying to be. Ava didn't fix anything. The coolant still leaked when it leaked. The bills were still what they were. The schedule was still a spreadsheet that required management. But she sat at the table with him, and she understood the weight of it, and she never once made him feel like the weight was something to be solved rather than shared. And that is what he hadn't known he was missing. And Ava had built a life that was extremely successful and completely empty of the things that make success feel like anything. She had a company and a penthouse and 4 years of Saturdays spent in boardrooms and brunch meetings dressed like performance reviews. And she had known, at some level, for a long time, that she was running from something by running toward achievement. What she hadn't expected, couldn't have planned for, and she was someone who planned for everything, was that the thing she'd been missing wasn't a person exactly. It was permission. Permission to be herself without the armor. Permission to spend a Saturday the way a free person spends a Saturday. Permission to love something small and imperfect and daily and call that enough. More than enough. Everything. She found that permission in a car on a mountain road, in the rain, holding a flashlight for a man who asked nothing of her except that she hold it steady. The world has a way of sending you exactly what you need in the container you'd least expect. 6 months after she moved into the third-floor apartment, Lily came up with her own name for the arrangement. Not Mom. She used that for Carla, carefully, in the visits that had gradually become more regular and more real, and were being handled, imperfectly but honestly, the way hard things are handled when people choose decency over drama. For Ava, she came up with something else. Something the three of them understood as belonging entirely to them. Ava mine. She'd said it first by accident one morning, and then said it again deliberately, watching their faces, testing whether it would land, and it had landed, and it had stayed. Ava mine. For the person who researched cycads at 11 p.m., and held a flashlight in the rain, and gave away the best Stegosaurus cookie, and moved into a third-floor walk-up because it was where she wanted to be. On an evening in late August, 6 weeks after Lily asked her question and Ava said yes, the three of them sat in the botanical garden, the cycad section, which had become a recurring destination, and Lily was explaining something to Mr. Wrinkles about the Jurassic ecosystem, and Nathan and Ava were sitting close enough that their shoulders were touching, and the late summer light was doing the thing that late summer light does in botanical gardens, making everything look briefly significant. "She's going to be a paleontologist," Ava said quietly, "or a marine biologist. Or both. She'll figure out a way." "She usually does." Lily looked up from her lecture to Mr. Wrinkles and looked at both of them with the evaluative gaze of someone conducting quality control. "You're being mushy," she announced. "We're being quiet," Nathan said. "That's the same thing," Lily said, and went back to Mr. Wrinkles. Nathan looked at Ava. Ava looked at Nathan. And they sat in the garden in the August light, their daughter explaining the Jurassic to a stuffed elephant between them, and neither of them said anything for a while, because there are moments in a life where everything that needed to be said has already been said, and what remains is simply the thing itself, the actual living of it, unremarkable and irreplaceable. This was one of those moments. They stayed until the garden began to close, until the light had shifted all the way to the low gold of early evening, and then they walked back through the paths together. Lily between them, one hand in each of theirs, swinging slightly, Mr. Wrinkles under her arm, and went home, to the third floor, to the parking lot view and the broken gas station sign, and the kitchen with the bills above the stove and the 2 spare chairs that had become 3, to the apartment that had been a careful life and had become, without announcement, without drama, exactly what it was always trying to be. A family. The kind you build yourself from ordinary materials, on an ordinary Tuesday, when you say yes to a $950 job and the world decides to meet you halfway.